Welcome, everyone, this is your friend, the DN WhatIf, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Loved Dynamite. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Wah. Kachan, I am going to be so late and it's your fault and… Why are you laughing at me? Katsuki just snorted into his mug, quirking an eyebrow at his chaotic tornado of a boyfriend. And how is it my fault exactly, that you are capable of sleeping through no less than 4 separate alarms and a cat jumping almost on your PP? Izuku paused in his frantic attempts at straightening his shirt and putting socks on at the same time, glancing up to pout at his smirking partner. Mini Might is blameless in this. He doesn't know any better due to the fact his dad is a sadistic beach who apparently loves winding me up as a form of entertainment. That made Katsuki full-on cackle, the corners of his mouth lifting in that stupidly stunning smile that always made Izuku's heart flutter stupidly. His crimson eyes almost seemed to shine when he smiled properly. Izuku could never get enough of it. Katsuki calmed himself and took another sip of his tea, eyeing Izuku over the top of his mug. Your buttons are wonky. Huh? Your buttons, Zuku. You're gonna end up nip-slipping in front of your class if you go out in that state. Izuku stopped flailing with his left sock and instead looked down at his shirt. Sure enough, he'd managed to put every single button through a wrong hole. He huffed in annoyance, glaring at the kitchen ceiling for a second before resigning himself to having undo and redo them all. For the love of all might. Katsuki simply snorted with laughter at him and turned to put his now empty cup in the sink. You want a cup of tea before you dash off like a madman? Or maybe, breakfast. No time, Kachan. I need to be in that classroom within the hour, and it takes nearly half an hour on the train from here, never mind the fact it'll be so much busier now that I've missed the earlier one, and I've got so many papers to hand out in. Nerd. Breathe. Stop. Calm down. You won't be late. You've still got time. Here, I'll grab your tie whilst you sort your disaster shirt out. Izuku took a breath as he finished up his buttons and Katsuki slipped past him to head back to their bedroom to grab him a tie. Probably a good idea. Kachan's sense of style was far superior to Izuku's. He'd at least pick a good one to match the rest of his hastily thrown together outfit. Plus, Kachan could actually tie a tie. Izuku still struggled with that particular task. Katsuki was soon back, tucking an annoyingly perfectly suited tie under Izuku's collar, his deft hands making quick work of knotting it neatly. His upper lip quirked ever so slightly at Izuku's little pout, knowing exactly what was going through his nerd's brain. There, all done. Looking a lot more professional, sensei. Oh, behave, Kachan. Although the faint blush taking over Izuku's cheeks quickly removed any hint of sting to his words. Thank you. You're welcome, nerd. Briefcase is on the coffee table, bento is in the fridge. You gonna be late tonight? I shouldn't be. No heroics class today, so hopefully won't have to screen anyone to the infirmary. Good. I should be done by 6. Patrolling with shitty hair today, so hopefully things should go relatively smoothly, so long as he does what I say. Kachan. Izuku scolded with a small smile. Kirishima is DMN good at his job and you know it. I know you enjoy working with him, no matter how much you grumble. Katsuki huffed in neither an affirmative or negative manner. Izuku took it as a win. Anyway, I really have to go now, else I'll miss the next train. I'll let you know if I get held up at all. Okay, Zuku. I'll see you tonight. Izuku smiled up at him, the bright genuine grin that always made Katsuki melt internally. He chuckled and pressed a small quick embrace onto his nose. Go on, nerd. Go kick some student butt. Izuku scoffed and slapped his arm playfully. No, Kachan. I'll go and try to inspire their brilliant minds with tales of my favorite pro heroes. He turned and headed towards the living room to grab his bag and briefcase. Katsuki followed, a small swagger to his step and a sly grin on his face. Oh, Zuku. They must be sick to death of hearing about me by now. Izuku laughed and glanced over his shoulder as he grabbed his things and moved to get his jacket from the hook. Oh no, Kachan. We haven't discussed Dynamite yet. We focus on the more classic, well-known, established heroes. He yelped and darted for the door as Katsuki growled and went to pounce on him, palms crackling ever so slightly. You cheeky little shitnerd. Bieka Sisihani love you. See you tonight. Izuku made as quick an escape as possible out the front door, giggling away as he ran down the hall to the lifts. Katsuki huffed to himself as he leant out the door to watch him scurry away. Yeah. Love you too, dickhead. He headed back inside, figuring he himself should start getting ready. He was dressed in comfortable civvy clothes, wanting to remain undetected if possible on the journey from home to the agency. It was surprisingly easy to do so most of the time. People were so used to seeing Dynamite in his trademark black and orange hero suit. Stick on a pair of sweatpants, an oversized hoodie, and a simple baseball cap, and he blended into the crowd easily enough. He kept his suit at the agency and would get changed when he arrived. As he moved around the apartment, grabbing keys, wallet, and phone, he suddenly realized Izuku had not gone to the fridge before leaving. Which meant, once again, he had left his lunch behind. Damn it, Deku. One day, I swear to all might. One day you'll get out of here on time, in one piece, with everything you need for the day. Katsuki paused and considered for a moment. He and Kirishima were patrolling a reasonably large area today, one that could take them near Ua. He could always drop the bento off. Leave it in Izuku's office or the teacher's lounge. Or, he could even swing by Izuku's classroom. Just drop in, unannounced. Would be fun to see both Izuku's and his class reaction to the sudden appearance of Dynamite in their homeroom. Katsuki smirked to himself, a small warm glow of glee settling in his stomach. Oh, how his nerd would blush and splutter and probably start mumbling and muttering away to himself. It was an opportunity he could not afford to pass up. And he knew Kirishima would be totally up for it. The man was the biggest softie in the world, but he was always up for a laugh. Especially when Katsuki and/or Izuku was involved. Decision made, Katsuki grabbed the bento box from the fridge and stuffed it into his bag. He quickly checked that there was enough food and water left out for Mini-Might, of course Izuku had named the DMN cat. And then headed out to walk the short 15 minutes to the agency. Today was going to be fun. Thankfully Izuku was not late. In fact, he made it into Ua with plenty of time to spare. The train had not been as busy as he'd feared, and thanks to his meticulous preparation the night before, everything he needed for the morning's lessons was ready to go. He would dutifully ignore the fact that said preparation made him almost 3 hours late home, and Katsuki had been incredibly grumpy about it. He made it up to him, eventually. He chucked his messenger bag to the side of his desk, and unloaded the paperwork from his briefcase onto his desk. He'd had a few coursework papers left to mark, so had finished them the previous night after dinner. Katsuki had grumbled about him bringing work home with him, yet again, but had eventually softened when he realized that several of said papers had analysis of his quirk included. Apparently several of Izuku's students were very keen to learn more about the explosive hero. Izuku was not ashamed to admit he had preened slightly himself when this news came to light, so he was stupidly proud of his boyfriend, Suhim. Izuku had also had the foresight to install himself a small coffee machine in his office. This was nothing short of a blessing on days like this where he felt like he was rushing and panicking like an idiot jumped out of bed. How exactly he had slept through every single alarm he did not know, although he and Kachan had been up a tad later than normal for a school night. Quickly repressing those thoughts to the darkest, most inner parts of his brain, Izuku focused on making himself a fresh coffee and gathering up everyone's now graded papers. He had about 15 minutes before he had to be in homeroom. Just enough time to get some much-needed caffeine in his system. This was his second year as a teacher at Ua. His first year had been at times chaotic, difficult, and downright crazy, but Izuku had loved every second of it. He'd managed to secure his homeroom class for their second year. He felt it imperative that the students have some form of stability throughout their time at Ua. Aizawa had stuck with Class A for all 3 years, and Izuku had carried that forward into his own teaching career. Sure, his class's experience had been somewhat outside of the norm, even for the hero course, but having Aizawa there by their side for all 3 years had made the world of difference in Izuku's eyes. Yes, okay, he'd ended up not becoming a pro hero after all that, but that didn't mean that those years and those lessons hadn't left an indelible mark on him. Aizawa was 100% Izuku's inspiration, and he would do everything in his power to get anywhere near the level of respect and admiration from his students that Aizawa had garnered from him and his classmates. A high bar to be sure, but Izuku was always up for a challenge. With minutes to spare, he downed his coffee, grabbed the papers, and headed out of his office to Class 2B. Good morning everyone. I certainly am pleased to see you all here seated and on time. Izuku strolled into his classroom, sunshine grin beaming out towards his beloved students. They'd had a rocky start. A bunch of angsty teenagers desperate to prove themselves, and an anxious ex-hero teacher still finding his way through the crazy maze that was education. But they had bonded. Izuku was such a charismatic and approachable person. His students couldn't help but fall in love with him and become determined to impress him at any given opportunity. They were so similar in respects. It was Izuku's first year of being a fully fledged teacher, and his class were taking those first scary steps towards becoming pros. They learned from each other and bonded in their experiences. Mutual respect bloomed, and it wasn't long before Izuku was able to keep his rowdy students under control, whilst at the same time imparting his seemingly invaluable and never-ending knowledge onto them. It was surely a recipe for success in every way. Izuku walked up to his podium at the front of class, pleased to see everyone was present. It was a rare occurrence indeed for there to be an empty desk in his classroom. His students were dedicated and diligent, plus they loved his classes. Izuku excelled at hero analysis, and his students ate every word up with glee. I have to say, I was extremely pleased with these coursework papers. I can see you have all worked incredibly hard on analyzing your chosen heroes, and looking deeply into how their quirks work, as well as other factors. As you all know, quirk analysis is something of a passion of mine, so to see you all taking this so seriously and with such great results, it really does warm my heart. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for being so dedicated to your work. I know you are all here to ultimately become pro heroes, but having this level of commitment to your studies outside of the physical aspects of hero training is so important, and I am so proud to have a class that sees and understands the benefits of tasks such as this. Several members of his class visibly blushed and smiled shyly at his praise. They knew he was right, of course. Being a hero was not all about being the quickest or strongest or fastest. Having brains alongside the brawn was equally important. They were pleased to be able to make their sensei happy and proud. Izuku then went from desk to desk, handing back the graded paperwork with many smiles and praises, as well as a few constructed criticisms. His students were not perfect in every aspect. No one ever could be, no matter what Katsuki said to the contrary, and Izuku made sure to make his students aware of where they had done well and where there were areas they could improve. It was a necessary balance. The rest of the morning was filled with further hero analysis, today's subject matter being Mirko and how she had adapted to hero work with prosthetic limbs. Mirko had always been a favorite hero of Izuku's, and he relished in the opportunity to impart his thoughts and knowledge onto his class. Mirko was strong, independent, and feisty. All traits Izuku admired. It seemed he was not alone. Several of his students were very passionate about the rabbit hero, and lauded over her dedication to the hero profession, even after being injured so horrifically in the line of duty. After an hour or so of intense discussions with his class, Izuku took a moment to sit at his desk and simply listen to the various conversations going on. He loved hearing the teenagers sharing their thoughts, bouncing ideas off each other and discussing how or why Mirko did things the way she did. He was incredibly fortunate to have such a bright bunch under his care, and he was determined to encourage them in every way possible. His musings were suddenly interrupted by a sudden boom of explosion, and a light tap 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 seconds later on one of the classroom windows. Silence suddenly descended across the classroom, and every eye turned to the left to see what, or rather who, had disturbed their lesson. To the chagrin of Izuku, and the absolute unfiltered joy of the majority of his class, pro-hero Dynamight was crouched on the windowsill outside, in full uniform and trademarked smirk in place. "Hey sensei. Let me in, won't ya?" Izuku blinked, unsure if he was currently experiencing reality, or if one of his students had accidentally hit him with their quirk. He had a couple of students in class that could create mirages or force people into witnessing false events. It wasn't an impossibility. But the fact that every single member of his class was currently glued to the image of Pro hero Dynamight crouching on the windowsill of their classroom several floors above ground level kind of gave the game away. And no way could anyone recreate Kachan's signature smirk. It was too perfect to be anything other than the real deal. Izuku sighed and quickly made his way over to the window, pointedly ignoring his students as he walked. There were enough rumors floating around the school as it was. No need to add fuel to that particular fire. Dynamite. What a pleasant surprise. We weren't expecting you, please come on in. How Izuku managed to remain cool, calm, and collected as his boyfriend slipped inside and landed softly on the classroom floor was anyone's guess. Izuku himself didn't even know. Katsuki smirked even more as he straightened up, rolling his neck and shoulders with slight cracks and pops as he let his eyes roam over the class in front of him. He knew almost everything there was to know about Izuku's students. The nerd was so proud of them, he couldn't help but wax lyrical at every given opportunity. So, this is Class 2B, huh? Yes, Cash. Dynamite. These are my homeroom students. Class. This is Pro Hero Dynamite. As I'm sure you're aware. There were just a few seconds of dumbfounded silence before the room erupted. Oh my gosh, it's Dynamight. He's here. Why is he here? What's going on? Oh dear lord, he's even prettier in the flesh. He's so tall. Am I dreaming right now? Seriously, someone pinch me. Okay class. Settle down. Izuku tried his best to calm his students, but he was fully understanding of their sudden uncontrollable excitement at being in the presence of a well-known pro. Lord knows he had had enough of those moments in the past. I fully understand Euro Dynamite just dropping by. He turned to slightly glare at Katsuki at this comment. One eyebrow quirked in questioning. But you all need to just calm down and take a breath right now. One by one, his students silenced themselves and settled back into their seats, though he could tell they were all desperate for more information. Yes, his class was brilliant and smart and strong. But dear lord, were they nosy and inquisitive as well. Izuku took a moment whilst they settled to look at Katsuki, eyebrow raised and lips pursed in questioning. Katsuki simply met his gaze and shrugged nonchalantly, lifting his left arm in answer. In his hand dangled a small tote bag with something box-shaped inside. You forgot your lunch today. Again, so figured I'd drop it off seeing as I was patrolling nearby. The temporary silence was deafening. Izuku felt his heartbeat once, twice, then was sure it stopped altogether and he was catapulted straight to hell. There was no way on this planet that he was currently experiencing this. No way would Katsuki Fdynamight turn up at his homeroom class just to drop off his lunch that he had, apparently, forgotten, again. Via the window no less. Of course he couldn't come in the normal way like everyone else. Duh. Thank you Dynamite. That's very considerate of you. His class erupted. There was no other way to describe it, from stunned silence to deafening screams and shouts. Izuku wanted nothing more than the floor to open up and swallow him whole. He could already feel the burning blush creeping up his face. And Katsuki just stood there and smirked like the utter butt he was. Izuku dared to glance up at him, hoping that for once his giant viridian eyes would show more than just lust or love or devotion. He needed Katsuki to understand the utter SHT show he had just landed them in. But Katsuki, Dynamite, just stood there, smirk firmly in place and tote bag SWNGNG innocently from one hand. What Izuku always failed to remember was that Katsuki simply did not give a SHT. Let the kids gossip. Let rumors spread. Katsuki did not give a single flying F. Izuku was his, and he didn't care who did or didn't know it. Izuku quietly sighed to himself, quickly coming to the realization that Katsuki really couldn't give a DMN on what his students thought. He reached up and took the bag, cheeks growing hotter and redder by the second. Katsuki chuckled to himself, DMN strawberry nerd. Okay everyone, that's enough. Enough, raising his voice when his first statement didn't quite make it through the ruckus. Katsuki cackled, when seeing Izuku's not-so-successful attempt at calming his class down. Oi, brats, he followed up with a couple of mild explosions from his palms. Nothing close to his full power, but enough to garner the attention of 20 wild-eyed teenagers. Your sensei is talking to you. The least you can do is listen. Hypocrite, came the smallest mumble from the man next to him. Huh? His plans crackled again, making the students in the first couple of rows flinch. I was always listening to our teachers, damn it. Air. Well. Not all the time, Dynamite. You had your moments, let's be honest here. Katsuki scowled at Izuku, wondering how on earth his idea of embarrassing Izuku in front of his precious class had descended onto a let's pick on Bakugo sesh. Everyone here knows I was a top student, Midoriya. I've seen those papers. I know exactly how some of your students view me. And yes, it did indeed give him great pleasure to see several of said students blush redder than Izuku's stupid high-top trainers. Some of them even went several shades of scarlet deeper than his nerd. Izuku huffed and looked up at him, one eyebrow slightly quirked, knowing he had a chance to enact some damage control. Well, in that case, Dynamite, you're just in time. For what? For hero analysis. We've been working on Mirko today, and her use of prosthetics. Maybe you can help with that? Katsuki scowled, knowing full well Izuku had him by the ball. Everyone and their mother knew that Katsuki was one of the very few that Mirko had ever taken on as an intern. She was not known for taking on students or interns or sidekicks. Katsuki was the exception to the rule. He figured it had to do with the war and Shigaraki. He had managed to impress the rabbit hero. And in turn, she had taken him under her wing. He had learned so much from her and would forever be grateful. And, he had to admit, it was even better than working alongside Endeavor. Mirko just seemed to get him. But that didn't mean he wanted to discuss it all with a class of wannabes, never mind how amazing they turned out to be. Out loud, he scoffed and raised an eyebrow at Izuku. And what exactly do they want to know? Izuku grinned at him, eyes glittering suspiciously. Oh, I'm pretty sure they'll take anything and everything you say to heart. Katsuki glowered at him, realizing just a tad too late that his boyfriend had the upper hand now. Said boyfriend smirked and stashed the tote bag with his lunch bento out of sight behind his desk. So class. Who has a question for pro hero Dynamite here? A flurry of arms reaching into the sky made Katsuki pause and almost splutter for a second. Okay, you brats. Hang on a second. I have literally 5 minutes. My hero partner is waiting on me outside. We're technically on duty right now, so I can't waste too much time on you. Make sure whatever you ask is relevant and important, otherwise I'll ignore you. He saw Izuku grinning out of the corner of his eye, then turned so that his attention was fully on the kids Izuku so adored. Okay. Hit me. Izuku was so happy, he felt like floating. Not only had his super secretive, intensely personal and protective boyfriend brought him lunch, he'd done so in front of his entire class. And then he had stayed for a Q&A. Sure, it was pretty short, and Katsuki had extracted himself from it as quick as humanly possible, but he had still done it. And that meant more to Izuku than anyone could fathom. He sat through his lunch break with a stupid dreamy smile on his face, picking through his bento that his kachan had so thoughtfully put together with joy. He never thought he would end up like this, teaching and nurturing future heroes, whilst at the same time managing to live out a dream he thought was never possible. He had known since he was young that Bakugo Katsuki was his person. He'd known it in his heart, but had never dared to dream that it would one day be a reality. He and Kachan had such a complicated history. It couldn't be put into simple words. Yet here they were, several years out from graduating living together, loving each other. It was all Izuku had ever dreamed of and so much more. Okay. So he hadn't technically ended up becoming a pro hero like he had always dreamed he would, quirk or no quirk. But he had helped save Japan, save the world. And that was worth so much more than any power he could hope to gain. Now he had the opportunity and the knowledge to pass on to future generations and heroes. And he absolutely could not F it up. With Katsuki by his side, his kachan, his symbol of victory, Izuku would never lose. He knew it. Kachan, I promise they are better than you think. Shut it, nerd. No way are those newbie wannabes better than Class A. We're the F Dream Team when we get together. Ah, Baku bro. You saying we're awesome? Zip it, shitty hair. I said no such thing. Ooh, I think you did, blasty boy. Just not in so many words. Shut it, Pinky. The self-proclaimed Baku squad just laughed at their leaders' denials and took further sips of their drinks. It was a rare occasion indeed when several of them got to hang out together, so none of them wanted to end the night prematurely. Mina grinned provocatively at Katsuki, knowing they had him on the rails. She clinked her nails against her glass. Come on Blasty. We all know you have a soft spot for homeroom teacher. Seriously Pinky. Shut it before I blow your acidic butt to the moon. Mina just laughed, knowing full well that Bakugo was a lot more bark than bite. She'd known him too long by this point to be scared of him. Come on bro. Everyone in our class knows you're soft for Midoriya. No shame in admitting it. Katsuki shivered ever so slightly at Kirishima's words. If only they knew. Just shut it you lot. You don't know SHT about me and Deku. Sure. Came Kaminari's reply from the other side of the booth they were in. Keep telling yourself that bro. Denki. That's enough. Came Jiro's calm and collected reply to the electric blonde's words. Shish now babe. But baaaaaabe. Not now Denki. Let Bakugo be. She quirked an eyebrow his way, letting Bakugo know that she understood what was going on, but was decent enough to keep her mouth shut. Thanks ears. Was all he let slip. He knew he liked her for good reason. He flicked his eyes up to look in Izuku's general direction, trying strong not to focus too much on his nerd. They weren't ready to go public. Not just yet. But DMN was it strong to restrain himself when out with their friends like this. Izuku was his, and he wanted every goddamn extra to know it. But, he also knew he had to preserve his image as a pro. Preserve Izuku's image as a teacher. Having their relationship out there in the open for all and sundry to evaluate was uncomfortable. He didn't want to share Izuku. The nerd was his. And going public with their relationship felt too soon, too fast. Didn't matter how long they had been together, it was no one else's business but their own. But their chosen careers didn't take that into account. As a pro, Katsuki knew keeping up a smart public image was part of the key to his success. Stupid PR management bullshit. But he fumed inwardly, wanting really nothing more than to scream from the DMN rooftops that Izuku was his and his alone. So maybe he had a slightly possessive streak, who knew? And as a, still relatively new, teacher of future pro heroes, Izuku needed to appear squeaky clean, unblemished and pure. If only they knew. Katsuki smirked to himself as he took another sip of his drink, content for now to just listen to the ramblings of his friends and fellow pros. They had jumped into a deep discussion on whether or not Izuku's class of wannabes had the skills to match up to the infamous Class A of their time. Izuku would happily natter on for hours about how amazing his students were, and how skilled they had already become, but Katsuki felt that saying they were anywhere near being on par with their own class was exaggerating a bit. Of course he wanted to help nurture the wannabes. Part of being a pro hero was helping to cultivate future generations into becoming the best heroes they possibly could. But he also knew well enough from his own experience growing up that it would not do to foster too much praise and admiration onto them. The bigger the ego, the harder the fall when it inevitably came. All I'm saying is that surely her quirk would be better suited to rescue than combat. Think about it. The whips or whatever you want to call them that she creates would be perfect for reaching out to people trapped in places without easy access. She's got the strength behind her as well to pull them out. Yeah, but they are made of literal fire, eh? You know, the hot stuff that burns you. Mina resisted the urge to facepalm. Can she learn temperature control then? Regulate the heat she produces so that they can be used safely? Izuku hummed, one finger pressed thoughtfully to his chin as he considered Kirishima's words. It's not something we've looked at in great detail yet. She's been more focused on learning control of the whips so that she can direct them any way she wants to. When she first came to class last year, she had next to no control over which direction they lashed out in. We ended up with scorch marks everywhere. It's taken this long for her to be able to manipulate them into the size and direction she wants them to be. I don't see why she couldn't learn to control the temperature, but I have a feeling it'll be easier said than done. Kirishima grinned, downing the rest of his drink and slamming the empty glass down onto the table in victory. If anyone can figure it out, it's you Midoriya. Those kids don't know how lucky they're to have you as their teacher. Don't let his head get any bigger shitty hair. He gets plenty of praise from those brats. Kachan, what? It's true. They think the sun shines out of your butt. Izuku rolled his eyes, finishing off his own drink. That's an exaggeration, Kachan, and you know it. They respect me as their homeroom teacher, and hold all the others in just as high regard. There's nothing special about me. His comments were quickly drowned out by several of their friends arguing loudly that Izuku was in fact special, and that his students should definitely appreciate him the most. Izuku was soon doing his best impression of a strawberry, flapping his hands in a desperate attempt to quieten them down. Katsuki simply chuckled to himself, knowing full well his partner was not good at receiving compliments. As much as he would take the PSS about inflating Izuku's ego, he knew it was well-deserved praise. Izuku was a DMN good teacher, and his students were indeed lucky to have him. The world would have been even luckier to have him as a fully blown pro-hero, but sadly that dream had been left behind after the war and the loss of OFA. Although if Katsuki had anything to do with it, he would ensure that at some point in the future, Izuku would be back by his side as a pro, where he really belonged. Speaking of which, he should probably touch base with Melissa soon for an update on the suit's progress. Alright you lot, settle down. You're worse than his bloody kids. This generated laughter from the table, with Izuku just shaking his head and smiling softly over at Katsuki. He appreciated his friends and what they were saying, but still struggled to accept the compliments. I've got an idea, Midoriya. You should totally have some of us in class one day. We can show those kids great examples of being heroes. Denki beamed at him, positively vibrating in his seat with excitement. Whoa, hold up there, charged old. You really want to put yourself in prime position for some serious teenage ribbing? They'll eat you alive. Denki just snorted, waving his hand dismissively at Katsuki. I've dealt with you all these years. A few teenagers don't scare me. Laughter bounced around their group again, Katsuki included. It was true that the group considered themselves immune to Katsuki's brand of tough love after all this time. Didn't stop him from dishing out the insults like sweets though. That's not actually a bad idea. Izuku mused out loud. I mean, so far they've only met Kachan out of all of you, and that was only a very brief visit. What? Mina screeched, hands slamming down on the table as she looked aghast between the pair of them. When did this happen? How did Blasty over here get to be the first one to meet your little darlings, Izuku? Izuku laughed, side-eyeing Katsuki as he did so. It was literally a fly-by visit Mina. Nothing planned or arranged. He just kinda dropped in one day a couple of weeks ago. Broccoli Brain over there forgot his lunch for the umpteenth time in a row. Kiri and I were patrolling near UA that day, so I figured I'd just swing by and say hello. Ended up in AFQ and a session mind. Kachan, it was a few questions in the space of 5 minutes. You couldn't get back out that window quickly enough if I recall. The window? Yeah, I took a shortcut. Mina blinked at him before bursting out laughing, hands wrapped around her middle as she cackled. Oh my god Blasty. Only you. Kirishima was chuckling away next to her. Yeah, and in the meantime, I was stuck standing like a complete lemon outside the gates, wondering if he'd been kidnapped, a bit flustered by the time he got back to me. I was not flustered, DMN kids didn't get to me. Keep telling yourself that, bro. A short while and another round of drinks later, it had been decided that Izuku would chat with Aizawa and the principal to arrange times for several of his former classmates to come in for official visits. Even Katsuki had begrudgingly agreed to take part. No DMN way was he letting anyone else steal his limelight, plus he knew it would make Izuku happy. He wasn't sappy and totally gone for his nerd at all, absolutely not. Okay. The fact he would happily blast his way to the ends of the earth and back to bring out that blinding smile was just a minor coincidence, nothing more. The group soon went their separate ways to head home, hugs and goodbyes all round. As Katsuki and Izuku set off into the dark evening, Izuku slipped his hand quietly into Katsuki's, squeezing gently in silent thanks. Katsuki squeezed back as he lifted his hood over his head for the walk home. DMN nerd. Coercing me into doing extra SHT on my days off. Oh Kachan, quit your grumbling. You and I both know you're secretly looking forward to being able to show off in front of my students. You'll take any given opportunity to show other people how amazing and strong you are. Katsuki smirked to himself, insides warming at the slightly sarcastic praise Izuku was giving him. Yeah well, it'll keep you quiet and make you happy, so it's whatever. Izuku grinned at him then, squeezing his hand again and adding a slight bounce to his step. Ah, you're only doing this for me Kachan? That's so sweet. Shut up nerd. I ain't sweet. Oh yes you are. You enjoy holding my hand, even out in public. You make me lunch every day, which you forget to take with you nearly every DMN day. Shish Ka-chan, that's not the point. You also like meeting up with our friends when we have time, even if you about them. You even manage to somewhat regularly contact your mom, and only call her hag a handful of times in each phone call. That's cause she is a DMN hag, and if I didn't ring her, she'd only end up on our bloody doorstep demanding to be let in for tea and to chat SHT. Ain't got time for that. Izuku laughed, bumping his shoulder to Katsuki's affectionately. Whatever Ka-chan, my point still stands. You are sweet sometimes, even if you don't want to admit it. Agreeing to come visit my class just proves it. Katsuki just rolled his eyes in reply and pulled Izuku closer, wrapping one arm tightly around him as they walked home. It was quite late now and the streets were blessedly empty. To anyone passing by, they just looked like any other normal couple heading home from a night out. They'd have to get up real close and personal to determine that it was in fact pro-hero Dynamite walking along with Izuku tucked firmly up against his side. And no way in hell was he letting anyone get that close to them. As they neared their apartment building, Katsuki digging in his pocket for their keys, Izuku pulled him to a stop, hands resting gently on Katsuki's waist. He glanced around quickly to ensure there was no one nearby, then lifted himself up on tiptoes to press a gentle embrace to Katsuki's lips. He felt the blonde smile and bring his hands to rest on Izuku's waist, pulling him in to deepen the embrace. Just for that moment, no one and nothing else existed around them. Katsuki found himself not even caring if anyone saw them. He loved his green-haired nerd and wanted the world to know already. A few moments passed before he pulled back slightly and bopped Izuku's nose with his finger. "Ya know what, Zuku? I figure you owe me now. It's a pretty big deal, you know, getting one of the biggest pro-heroes to agree to come visit a bunch of kids in his very limited spare time." "Oh, is it now? I think I should be rewarded for my sacrifice." "Your sacrifice? Really, Ka-chan, you are so dramatic sometimes." Katsuki simply grinned at him, taking hold of Izuku's hand to start pulling him inside. "Spending my strong-earned free time with a bunch of crotch goblins sounds like a DMN sacrifice to me." "Ka-chan, they're not crotch goblins. So I figure that I should definitely be getting something in return. Don't you think so, sensei?" Izuku shivered as Katsuki pulled him through the front door. There was something about the way Katsuki said that word that made his insides squirm in the most delicious way. Katsuki knew all the ways to make Izuku go weak at the knees, and the blonde was stupidly proud of that fact. "Okay then, Ka-chan. How exactly would super busy pro-hero Dynamite like to be compensated for his precious time?" Katsuki smirked at him, crimson eyes glowing at Izuku as he pressed the button for the elevator. "I'm pretty sure an intelligent sensei such as yourself can come up with something decent for me. Put that big brain to use, him?" Izuku returned the smirk, a cheeky glint coming to his own eyes that made Katsuki swallow in anticipation. The lift doors opened with a slight ping, and Izuku quickly pushed Katsuki in, ramming the button for their floor. "Oh, I'm sure I can, Katsuki." He practically purred out, leaning in close to his boyfriend and running his hands down Katsuki's sides. "I might even be really nice and give you something in advance of your visit. A small way of saying thank you and ensuring you keep your word to come by." Katsuki growled and grabbed Izuku by the hips, pulling him in tight and nuzzling against his forehead. It wasn't very often Izuku would take the lead in these situations, but when he did, there was no power on earth strong enough to stop Katsuki from lapping up every second. "I think that's only fair, Zuku, and who knows? If the reward is good enough, I may even be down for a return visit sometime." Izuku hummed, reaching forwards to gently pull at Katsuki's bottom lip with his teeth. "I'd say I'm up for the challenge." The lift came to a stop, doors sliding open to their floor. Izuku pulled Katsuki out by the hand, hurrying down the hallway to their apartment. Katsuki snickered quietly behind him, more than happy to be tugged along. "Don't let Mini Might slip out when you open the door. That little effer almost made it 2 floors down last time. I don't plan on giving him time to reach the door, let alone get out it. Come along, Ka-chan. I need to give you your reward." Katsuki was so grateful they'd had the foresight to have soundproofing installed. "Remind me again why I agreed to this." Izuku laughed, glancing over at his partner in the driver's seat. Katsuki was frowning slightly, one hand gripping the steering wheel whilst the other was up by his face, fingers tapping his cheek gently in an almost nervous gesture. They didn't use the car very often, had no real need to, but as Katsuki was due to head straight over to his agency after his visit with Class 2B, he figured it was just more convenient. Because you love me and want to show off to my students? Katsuki huffed, the tips of his ears tinging ever so slightly pink. Yeah, well. Seemed like a good idea at the time. You're not blaming the alcohol for this one, Kachan. No, I'm blaming you. Izuku laughed again, turning his gaze back to the window as they approached Ua. Scared of a few teenagers, Kachan? No, not scared. But not scared of anything, DMN nerd. Okay, Kachan. Whatever you say. Katsuki huffed again as they pulled into Ua's parking lot, making sure Izuku's parking permit was clearly on display. It wouldn't do to end up with a DMN ticket alongside having to spend his morning with a group of brats. Katsuki grabbed his bag containing his hero suit as Izuku got out the car, briefcase in hand. First stop was the teacher's lounge. Izuku felt Katsuki was long overdue in saying hello to Aizawa. Will the old man even be awake yet? Or at the very least out of his sleeping bag? Izuku frowned at him as they walked along. Kachan, he's not an old man. And of course he will be. You know Aizawa is awake at all hours. Just naps, nor quite managed to break the habit of staying up most nights, even though he doesn't patrol anymore. I don't think he has anything even remotely close to a sleep schedule. Unlike some people I know, Mr. in bed before 10 p.m. every night. Katsuki simply rolled his eyes and scoffed in response. Ain't nothing wrong with making sure I get enough sleep so that I don't fall flat on my face due to exhaustion at work. I'm AF professional, damn it. Izuku laughed again, approaching the lounge door. I know, Kachan, I'm just teasing. Sure enough, Aizawa was awake and NRSNG a steaming mug of coffee as the two entered. He quirked an eyebrow in greeting to Katsuki, getting a small grunt and raised hand in return. Bakugo. Good to see you. I was honestly pleasantly surprised when Midoriya told me of the plan for today. Never thought you'd agree to it, never mind be the first one to come. Katsuki simply grunted again, dropping his bag onto a nearby chair and making a beeline for the freshly made coffee. Yeah, well. DMN nerd always seems to know how to get me to do SHT he wants. Oh, I'm sure he can be very convincing. The way Aizawa's words tailed off made Katsuki glance over at him, eyes narrowing slightly as he tried to gauge his former teacher's face. Aizawa gave nothing away, simply sipped his coffee and settled back into his chair. Izuku made a point of busying himself with some paperwork from his briefcase to avoid joining the conversation, but his quiet mutters and slowly reddening cheeks were strong to miss. Katsuki sighed, plopping himself down into a chair with his coffee opposite Aizawa. Alright, sensei, out with it. I can see you've got something you want to say. Aizawa simply tilted his head to one side, a questioning gaze at Katsuki. Do I? Kachan. It's okay, Izuku. You know he's always been more observant than every other FR. Aizawa chuckled softly, leaning forwards with his elbows on his knees and looking between the two men. So how long has it been? How long has what been? Izuku toyed nervously with his shirt cuffs, still unwilling to meet Aizawa's eyes. You too. How long have you been together? Katsuki grinned and started laughing as Izuku went from slightly pink to full-blown strawberry scarlet in seconds, turning his back to them to start rifling through his paperwork again. DMN nerd was so shy about these things, whereas Katsuki. Officially, couple of years. Unofficially, hey, since we were brats really. Kachan. Katsuki cackled out loud, unable to hold back his delight at Izuku's expression. What? It's true nerd. We've been DMN near inseparables since BRTH. Seems only logical we'd end up here. Izuku rubbed a hand over his face, trying to cool the hot blush away. Kachan, there's a big difference between friendship and what we have now. It's called a relationship, dipshit. You can say it out loud, you know. Kachan. I could have worded it very differently, you know. I'm quite happy to say out loud that we're fuck. Kachan, no. Aizawa was laughing out loud by this point too. He could so easily see aspects of his past self in the Izuku stood before him now. When he and Hisashi had finally made that step from just being friends to something more, everything inside him just wanted to keep it quiet, not let anyone know. He was always the first one to blush or change the subject when talks of their relationship came up. Whereas Hisashi was definitely a lot more like Bakugo, loud, proud, and didn't give a DMN. The only thing they had agreed on was keeping their now marriage secret from their students. That would have involved conversations neither of them wanted to have with teenagers. It's okay, Midoriya. You have no reason to be embarrassed. Honestly, I was wondering what was taking the two of you so long. Huh? What do you mean, Aizawa? He grinned at Izuku, ignoring Katsuki's questioning look. Finishing off the last of his coffee, he stood and went to get himself a refill, patting Izuku's shoulder as he walked by. While all the teachers presumed you were together when still in school, they were sorely disappointed to find out you weren't. There was a betting pool going and everything. Wah. How? What? Izuku's blush returned in full force, and Katsuki started cackling again. He was so pleased he got to witness this firsthand. Aizawa simply shrugged in response and headed back to his seat, coffee freshly topped up. Just seemed inevitable. Bakugo's right. You two have always been inseparable, even when you weren't getting along. I'm no romantic by any stretch, but even I have to admit that there are some people that just seem destined to be together. Suppose President Mike gave you that idea, huh, sensei? Aizawa looked back at Katsuki, sighing when he saw that little knowing smirk on the man's face. Fair was fair, he supposed. Yes, Bakugo. You could say that. F knew it. Izuku looked between the two of them, confusion clearly etched on his face. Knew what, Kachan? Katsuki simply pointed at their former teacher whilst downing the last dregs of his coffee before standing up. Him and President Mike. Don't tell me you didn't know, nerd? Izuku gaped, looking back at Aizawa. The older man simply shrugged, opting to just sip his coffee in silence whilst Izuku processed this newest life bombshell. No way. That's so cool, I had no idea. How long have you been together? Are you married? Was it when we were at school too? Oh wait, it must have been. God, that makes so much more sense now. Izuku. Katsuki warned, poking his arm as he walked by. You're rambling again. Leave the poor man alone. Izuku pouted. You started it. Aizawa chuckled again, nodding at Izuku's questions. Yes, Midoriya. We've actually been married for several years now. We've just always kept it quiet from the public, especially our students, and I'm sure you two of all people can understand the reasoning behind that. The two men nodded, thinking back over the many conversations they had had regarding how open they wanted to be about their relationship. It was nothing to do with being embarrassed or ashamed about it. They loved each other fiercely and would fight anyone who claimed any different. But it was difficult enough having their lives already in the spotlight. They simply didn't want every single aspect of themselves available out in the world for everyone to talk about and gawk over. Katsuki especially was a very private person, and he was keen to keep his personal life as separate from his professional one as possible. They knew it would all come out eventually. It would have to. Especially if they ended going down the route of marriage. Katsuki was pretty sure their friends were highly suspicious already. How they had managed to keep completely stum on things for over 2 years already was nothing short of a miracle. Especially considering one of their closest friends was self-proclaimed gossip queen Mina. Speaking of students, haven't you two got somewhere to be? Aizawa commented, noting the time as he sipped more coffee. Katsuki was sure the man had more caffeine than BLD in his veins. Izuku let out a squeak, turning to grab up his discarded paperwork and briefcase. Oh my god, I didn't realize the time. Kachan, go get changed and I'll meet you in homeroom in 10. On it, nerd. Nice seeing y'all, Aizawa. Same to you, Bakugo. Don't leave it so long next time, EH. Katsuki grinned, grabbing his bag and sauntering out the door with a quick wave. Sure thing, sensei. By the way, you gonna get any winnings from that betting pool? Cash on. Aizawa laughed and nodded. Sure, kid. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to buy Eri a few new outfits. Katsuki's laugh echoed down the corridor as he walked away, leaving a blushing nerd to hurry through his goodbyes and dash off to his classroom. Aizawa chuckled to himself in the now silent room, sitting back and letting himself enjoy his drink in peace before he too went off to meet his students. He sincerely was happy for the pair, and secretly dured it out before they decided to announce it. DMN straight, he was an observant FR. The classroom of 2B was quietly buzzing, an air of excitement practically shaking the walls. Izuku had told his students that a pro was coming to visit them today, and actually stay for the morning. They'd have a quick Q&A session first before heading out to the training grounds to show off their skills. But they didn't know who was coming. Izuku had purposefully kept that tidbit to himself. He hadn't even given them any clues. He knew his class and knew they would figure it out in no time at all if he even gave them a sniff of an idea of who their guest was. He wanted them unprepared, unable to formulate a plan ahead of time to try and get one over on Dynamite. Plus he was looking forward to seeing the looks on their faces when their previous visitor by window came back for a longer chat. As he entered the room, the students diligently quietened down and looked at him. He could already see the excitement brewing, and remembered fondly his own times in these classes, always eager to meet and study any pro hero at all. Good morning everyone. Nice to see you all here bright and early. As you know, we have a guest coming in today. I expect all of you to be on your best behavior. Please try not to embarrass me in front of a pro. Small titters ran through his students as he grinned and leant forward on his desk. We'll be having a reasonably quick discussion in here first of all. I've set aside half an hour in order for you to ask questions before we head out to the training grounds. Please bear in mind that these questions need to be respectful. Do not ask anything personal or insulting. Remember that this pro has taken time out of their own personal time to come and see you. They're on patrol this afternoon, hence why we only have them for the morning. I expect all of you to respect that and behave accordingly. It took a lot of organization and effort to get this time set aside today. A round of nods and murmured consent came from his class. Izuku smiled warmly at them. He was still feeling slightly out of sorts after his unexpected conversation with Katsuki and Aizawa mere minutes ago, but he was able to put on his professional teacher face and carry on as normal. Feel free to take notes throughout this session. Anything you can learn from a pro is always important. They don't just have knowledge to share, but also life experiences. Take it all in and use it to further your own hero journey. A few students raised their hands, asking carefully what sort of questions could and could not be taken personally, and what else they could expect from the morning. Izuku clarified as much as he could for them, and was midway through another answer when the door to their classroom slid open, and pro hero Dynamite strolled on in, signature smirk in place. Mornin' kids. Sensei. Izuku rolled his eyes with a small smile as his class, once again, erupted with screams and yells of excitement at the sight of the hero. Katsuki had not put on every part of his outfit. He'd left behind the gauntlets and headpiece for the time being. It being summertime, he'd opted for the sleeveless version too. This made Izuku very happy. It also made a hell of an impression as he entered the classroom, doors sliding closed behind him. Katsuki sauntered up to Izuku's desk, leaning nonchalantly on his elbow and eyeballing the teenagers in front of him. Good morning Dynamite, Izuku replied with a smile. Thank you for taking the time to come join us today. The students have plenty to ask you, I'm sure. TCH. Katsuki replied, glancing at Izuku briefly before pinning his red eyes back onto the class. Sure they do. Not every day you get the chance to ask a pro what they have for breakfast or whatever. That generated some nervous giggles from the students, and Izuku scoffed lightly himself before turning his gaze back to his class. Alright then guys, you know the drill. Hands up. One question at a time. Dynamite will pick who gets to ask. And remember what we were just discussing before he arrived. I'm trusting you. At this he turned back to look at Katsuki. Feel free to not answer something if you don't want to. I've told them to be respectful, but... Katsuki smirked. Yeah I get it. F teenagers or whatever. Language, TCH. Whatever sensei. Alright then you lot. What you got for me today? A flurry of hands went into the air, everyone seemingly desperate to get their question in before their half-hour was up. Izuku snorted a small laugh whilst Katsuki huffed and gave him a quick glare before pointing out a girl halfway back. Go ahead kid. Oh, thank you Mr. Dynamite sir. Just Dynamite will do kid. Ain't got time for formalities and stuff. Oh yes. Of course. Well, I was wanting to ask how you made the decision on where to intern and work study when you were here at UA. Was there any particular reason you went with the agencies you did? Katsuki grinned. Sure was. Initially I just wanted to go with whoever was highest in the rankings at the time. Figured I'd get the best experience from the top-rated pros. And they all taught me a hell of a lot. Working alongside Endeavor wasn't always the plan. That Icy Hot got us a way in and I figured I may as well roll with it. Icy Hot. He means Pro Hero Shoto, Izuku clarified. Dynamite prefers nicknames for our former classmates. Katsuki flashed him a quick grin before going into further detail about his time spent with Mirko. Izuku noticed most of his students were frantically scribbling away in notebooks, eagerly taking in everything Katsuki was saying. He smiled to himself, and settled back to enjoy the discussion. Alright then. Who's next? Let's see. Okay you kid, back row. What you wanna know? A short boy with dark blue hair grinned in response to being chosen. Thank you Dynamite. I'm just really interested to know how you came up with your hero name. Was it something you'd always had in mind, or did it come to you later on? Izuku snorted. Of course someone had to ask that question. Katsuki sighed before resigning himself to it. He gave as quick and simple an explanation as he could, skirting somewhat around the fact it had taken a fair bit of time before he finally settled on just using the dynamite part. The questions continued thusly, and to give him credit, Katsuki answered every single one. The students were great. No one asked him anything about his personal life outside of hero work. Even though Izuku knew rumors were out there about the two of them, he really didn't want to have to face off with his students on that particular topic. Eventually their half hour was up, and Izuku got the class moving to grab their hero cases and head out to Gym Gamma. He and Katsuki would meet them there. The class quickly filtered out to get change, leaving them alone, and Katsuki took the opportunity to swig from his water bottle. Izuku smiled at him as he got himself ready to head out with his class. What you smilin' for nerd? That went really well. Thank you Kachan. I know they all really appreciate and enjoy having you here answering their questions. It means a lot to them, and to me. Katsuki smiled softly at him, reaching his hand up to ruffle green curls. So no trouble Zuku. They seem like decent kids. Wouldn't be fair of me to deny them access to the world's greatest now, would it? Izuku laughed, reaching up to grab Katsuki's hand and press a quick embrace to it. Now who's got the big ego Kachan? Katsuki's smile turned into a full-on smirk as he leant forward to whisper in Izuku's ear. Well everything else about me is big. May as well have the ego to match. Izuku quickly felt his blush returning and stepped back, swatting at Katsuki's hand as he did so. Kachan behave. Nah. This is way more fun. How long do you think it'll take the kids to figure it out? Kachan no. Kachan yes. Katsuki's good and somewhat cheeky mood continued out with high students were all lined up waiting and ready for them. Izuku took himself off to one side, leaning against the wall to just observe as Katsuki put the kids through their paces. He started with a small demonstration of his own quirk, firing off sparks from his palms and explaining how his nitroglycerin sweat worked. The students were fascinated, and Izuku was none too surprised to see several of them yanking notebooks and pencils out of pockets to hastily scribble down more notes. He really had rubbed off on them. Next, Katsuki picked out a few students at a time to step forward and show him what their quirks were and how they utilized them. He quickly pointed out things they were doing well as where they could make improvements. Katsuki had always had a good eye for helping others out physically. Training and fighting were second nature to him, and he was more than happy to impart his strong one knowledge onto others. Izuku's class lapped it up. They were enthralled by Katsuki, hanging off his every word. Izuku was impressed that the pro even managed to rein in the worst of his language. His students were no angels by any means, but there was no need for them to hear profanities being spewed by a pro every few seconds. Katsuki did have a reputation to uphold after all. He may have been considered the bad boy of heroes, but there was a limit. The next 2.5 hours flew by in a flash. Katsuki made sure to give every single student some one-on-one time, knowing it would mean a lot to Izuku to see him trying so strong. And well, he wanted to impress these brats, damn it. At the end of the day, they were the future. Katsuki had been in their position only a few years ago. He'd taken it somewhat for granted at the time whenever a pro would come by to teach or train with them. Now, looking back, he realized just how vital those sessions had been. Being in the position now to be that inspiration himself, Katsuki was not going to half-ass it. Izuku joined in where he could, offering further suggestions and adding on to Katsuki's ideas. The pair of them worked effortlessly together, and the students quickly came to understand why the pair were regarded as highly as they were. It was a shame that Izuku was no longer working as a pro hero. He and Dynamite would make one hell of a team. But all of them were grateful to instead have him as their teacher. They decided to wrap things up with what was basically a game of tag. Except instead of trying to tag others to make them, all the tagging was being done by a cackling Katsuki, blasting his way around the gym chasing down Izuku's squealing giggling students, and tagging them out one by one. It was a manic free-for-all, one which left Izuku almost crying with laughter. Moments like this were so important. Yes, they were heroes in training. Yes, they had big responsibilities to shoulder, and a hell of a lot more to come. And yes, they were almost adults, but for now, for this small snippet of time, they could relax a bit, let go, and just enjoy themselves. Having fun was just as vital as training. Katsuki finally caught the last student, giving him a swift high five in celebration of holding out the longest. Nicely done, kid. You've definitely got speed on your side. Was like working with four eyes again. Ingenium, Izuku helpfully provided when the students looked to him in puzzlement. Katsuki sauntered over to stand next to Izuku again, grabbing his water bottle and chugging several mouthfuls. He was covered in sweat, arms aching slightly from using his quirk without a proper warm-up, but he was grinning from ear to ear and looking oh so proud of himself. Okay everyone, time to wrap this up. Thank you again to Dynamite for spending his morning off with us. I hope you've all been able to take away a lot from today's session. Go get yourselves cleaned up and change. I'll see you back in homeroom after lunch. The class all turned towards Katsuki, bowing and thanking him profusely. He waved them off, but Izuku noticed there was a definite pink tint to the tips of his ears. No sweat you lot. Was good to meet you all. Keep working on everything we discussed today, yeah? I'll be asking your sensei here for updates, and expect to hear only good things. If I don't, I'll have to come back and kick your asses some more. Laughter came from the students as they filed out of the gym, mixed in with several conversations of admiration and excitement at how the morning had gone. Izuku could already tell his afternoon was going to be hectic. Well, that went well, he commented to Katsuki, looking up at him with a grin. You did even better than I expected with them. Huh, don't sound so surprised, nerd. You know I never half-ass anything. I know, Ka-chan. I was honestly just expecting a lot more swearing and a lot less patience, I guess. But you were brilliant with them. Thank you. I really mean it. Katsuki turned to look at his partner, a small smile quirking at the corners of his mouth. So no big deal. Like I said, knew it would make you happy. And they seem like a good bunch. Got some strong quirks amongst them. They'll be hot on our heels before we know it. Izuku laughed, linking his fingers in with Katsuki's and giving them a gentle squeeze. They'll be after your position, Dynamite. I'm going to keep pushing them strong as I can so they fly up the rankings just like you. Katsuki scoffed, squeezing Izuku's hand back. They'll never catch me, nerd. I'm too DMN good. There's that big ol' ego rearing up again. Honestly, Ka-chan, you know pride comes before a fall, right? Ha. F that SHT Zuku. I know I'm good and there's no point being shy about it. Confidence is supposed to be sassy, you know. And it is. I just don't want anyone else thinking they can get in on that confident butt of yours. It's my butt after all. He reached round to give said rear a cheeky squeeze. Katsuki growled and pulled Izuku in closer, fingers wrapped tight around his hips. Damn it, Zuku. Now is not the time to play. But Ka-chan. Izuku pouted, glancing up at him through his eyelashes. You started it. Huh? Since when? In the classroom. Remember, you were telling me how everything about you is big. Katsuki huffed before pulling Izuku all the way in for a deep embrace, purposefully biting his lower lip to make it swell slightly. Izuku moaned, hands reaching around Katsuki's waist to hold on tight, giving back as good as he got. They were still stood in the middle of the gym, seemingly uncaring if anyone came by. At least they'd get a good show if they did turn up. Katsuki eventually pulled away, smirking at the glazed look on his boyfriend's face. He ran a finger slowly down one cheek, grazing across Izuku's jawline. Vivid green eyes locked onto his, a slight blush coloring Izuku's face. I had to go to work now, Zuku. And you need to go deal with a bunch of overexcited teenagers. We'll finish this later. I hope that's a promise. DMN, right it is. After all, surely I now get the second part of my reward for doing this SHT? Izuku hummed thoughtfully, tilting his head to one side whilst he considered exactly what he wanted to give Katsuki later on. The explosive hero could read Izuku like a book, and he was not ashamed to admit he felt stirrings in his trousers when Izuku smirked up at him and nodded slowly. I guess you're right, Ka-chan. Better make sure you're not late tonight then. TCH. You're the one who's usually late, nerd. Seeing as I've got the car today, how about I swing by and pick you up after my shift him? That way we'll both be home on time. That's a very good idea. Okay then, I'll meet you later. Don't blame me if we don't make it all the way home though before. He purposefully trailed his sentence off into silence, a small smirk still in place. Katsuki swallowed and blinked at Izuku, his brain registering what it was that Izuku was implying. DMN Zuku. You really do have a filthy mind sometimes. Although I'd rather not have to fork out for interior cleaning. Izuku laughed lightly, pulling himself and heading back towards the exit. Oh, don't worry about that, Ka-chan. I'll make sure nothing gets spilled. Katsuki huffed and readjusted the lower half of his suit as Izuku walked away laughing. Sweet F. Damn it, nerd. I've gotta go on F patrol now. That sounds like a you problem, Ka-chan. I'll see you tonight. Katsuki paused to give himself a moment to breathe and calm down before strolling out after Izuku. He now had to face several hours of patrol with Mina of all people, and there was no way in hell he was doing that whilst at half-mast. Goddamn nerd. Gonna F make him pay for that later, cheeky little shithead. He grumbled to himself all the way back to the main building, grabbing his belongings before heading back to his car. He had just enough time to get back to the agency, clean up, and grab a bite to eat before heading out with Mina. And no matter how wound up he felt after Izuku's little tease in the gym, he couldn't help but admit that he felt proud and actually pretty DMN happy after a morning spent with Class 2B. He'd enjoyed himself, and felt that he had really been able to give them valuable information and tips. He wasn't sure who was next from their group to go in and meet them, but he sure as hell knew he'd set the bar DMN high for them to make an impression. He smirked to himself as he pulled away from UA, cranking his music up high, and tapping along to the beat with his hands on the wheel. It was only lunchtime and already, Katsuki was having a fan-tastic day. And it would only improve later on. Katsuki came to awareness ever so slowly, shifting around in bed and letting out a yawn. His arm flopped to the side, and it took him a second to register the fact that the other side of the bed was empty. Where was Izuku? He frowned to himself, sitting up and rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. He knew Izuku had been there earlier when he'd crept into bed, desperately trying not to wake him. A sleep-deprived Izuku was a menace to deal with. Katsuki had worked a late shift, not coming home until way past midnight. He tiptoed his way through their apartment, hushing Minimite's excited meows at his appearance. He'd even gotten changed in the spare room. Let no one ever say that Katsuki was inconsiderate. Thank All Might he now had 2 days off to recover. He glanced over to his phone on the bedside table. The time 3:42 a.m. blinked up at him. He groaned and rubbed his hand over his face. He'd barely been in bed a couple of hours. What the hell had woken him? And where was his DMN nerd? He then realized their bedroom door was open, and light was spilling down the hallway from the direction of their bathroom. Then he heard it and his heart sunk. Retching. Sounded like Izuku was becoming acquainted with their U-bend. Katsuki groaned again, really not wanting to have to deal with this. He was tired. F that, he was exhausted. And a poorly Izuku was his least favorite flavor of nerd. But there was no one else. It was just the two of them with Minimite. And it's not like the DMN cat could hold his hair out of his face and rub his back in sympathy. Looked like his 2 days of peace and relaxation were destined to be anything but. Katsuki inwardly braced himself before swnging his legs out of bed, hauling himself to his feet and padding through to the kitchen. First things first, water. Then he'd go see just how bad a state Izuku was in. The sounds of vomiting followed him down the hallway. He sped up, quickly filling a glass and grabbing some kitchen roll before heading back towards the bathroom. God only knew what kind of mess he was about to walk into. He needed to be prepared. He rapped his knuckles lightly against the door before sticking his head in to assess the damage. Zuku. You okay in here, babe? Let it be known that that particular pet name only came out during times of greatest need, like right the F now. A truly pathetic sight greeted him. Izuku was slumped on the floor, arms wrapped around the toilet bowl with his forehead leaning against the seat. He managed to muster enough energy to lift one arm, flipping a middle finger up at Katsuki before bringing his hand back down with a gentle thud. Just effin', peachy Kachan. Okay, the nerd was swearing, it must be bad. Katsuki tutted and stepped in, kneeling down next to his grumpy sickly boyfriend. He put the glass of water down within arm's reach of Izuku, the kitchen roll being tucked away to one side. With his free hand, he gently combed back some of Izuku's sweaty curls, taking the chance to feel and see if he had a fever. You're burning up, Zuku. You must have caught a bug or something from those DMN brats of yours. Heh. That's a very backhanded way of calling me hot Kachan. Katsuki blinked in surprise before chuckling lightly. Effin' hell, Zuku. Seems like this bug is giving you a sense of humor as well as stomach cramps. Izuku barked out a short laugh before tensing up and continuing to empty whatever was left of his stomach contents into the toilet bowl. Katsuki winced, moving his hand down from Izuku's head to move gently across his back, rubbing in what he hoped were soothing circles. Katsuki himself hated it whenever he was vomiting. The taste, the smell, the sound. Never mind the brutal assault on your stomach muscles. He knew Izuku was just as bad as him when it came to being ill. Both stubborn as hell, wanting to carry on as normal, and nowhere near patient enough to deal with just waiting to get better. That's it, babe. Get it up and out. Nearly done, I'm sure. I've got some water here ready for you. Katsuki also knew he wasn't the world's greatest carer either. He was rubbish when it came to offering words of comfort. He was a man of action, not words. He'd be there ready with water, towels, pills, whatever the nerd needed. But gentle words and reassuring whispers. Not really Katsuki's style. He was a lot better than he used to be. During his school years, he'd go out of his way to avoid interacting with anyone who needed some form of comfort. Whether they were sick or sad about something, Katsuki was absolutely not the person to turn to. But he'd grown, he'd matured. And damn it if he hadn't fallen in love with the green-haired idiot currently hugging their toilet like his life depended on it. And love, it seemed, had softened some of Katsuki's tough and bristly edges. He found himself wanting to comfort Izuku, to help make him feel better. He'd find some comforting words to soothe his nerd, even if he choked on them. Izuku finally stopped heaving, his arms slowly coming up from around the bowl to help push himself away from the loo. Katsuki steadied him with a hand to the back, reaching out to grab the glass of water with the other. Here. Few sips to rinse your mouth out, then just a few more small ones. You're probably dehydrated as F by now. Izuku nodded mutely, taking the glass from Katsuki before swilling his mouth out and spitting it into the toilet. Katsuki reached over to flush whilst Izuku sat back, sighing as he stretched his legs out and took a few more tiny sips of water. Katsuki stood to grab a washcloth, dampening it under cold water before kneeling back down next to Izuku. He gently rubbed it across Izuku's sweat-drenched forehead and cheeks, pushing his hair back behind his ears to gain better access. You need a DMN haircut, nerd. Starting to look more like shrubbery than ever. Ah, shut up, Kachan. Izuku slurred, raising a hand to pathetically swipe in Katsuki's general direction. Kachan so mean to me. I'm not a shrub. Shrubbery. Katsuki snorted, unable to stop himself when Izuku pouted, cheeks puffing out in indignation. Ah no, that's right. My bad. You're my little strawberry shortcake. My mighty green bean. My emotional support broccoli. Oh hush, Kachan. You, oversized angry Pomeranian. Katsuki did laugh out loud then, his cackles only growing louder as Izuku continued to pout at him. No matter how strong the nerd tried, he could never quite pull off the menacing, I'm going to kill yo seconds glare that Katsuki had perfected years ago. Especially when he was feeling sick and sorry for himself, drenched in sweat with a sleep-deprived Katsuki trying his best to comfort him. Okay Zuku. Okay. You got me good there. Effin' Pomeranian. Really? Of all the dogs in all the world. Couldn't pick me out AF scary one. or at least one that was bigger than my DMN shoe size. Izuku frowned at him, head tilted to one side in confusion. But your fur wouldn't match any other dog's, Kachan. My fur? My what? Your fur. Izuku pointed at Katsuki's head. His trademark blonde spikes were all over the place, half flattened and half stood on end. He had a serious case of bedhead going on. Your fur is perfect for a Pomeranian. Katsuki sighed and rolled his eyes so strong he swore he could see his own brain. Zuku. That's my hair, you idiot. I don't have fur. Sweet F Lord. You seriously are dehydrated, getting me mixed up with an overgrown rat. I'm getting you more water. No, Kachan, stay. Izuku made grabby hands towards him as Katsuki pulled himself up to his feet. Don't want to be on my own. I'm literally just going to the sink to refill your glass, nerd. I'll be back in a minute. Just stay there and stay out of trouble for 5 seconds, okay? MMMKAY, Kachan. The puppy can keep me company. Puppy. What effin' puppy? We have a cat, Izuku, that puppy. The one next to your head. Dear sweet All Might. The nerd was hallucinating. Katsuki sighed, pushing himself back to his feet. Alright, Zuku. The puppy will stay here whilst I fetch you some water, K. MMMKAY, Kachan. Cute little puppy. Good nerd. Katsuki grabbed the now empty glass and hauled butt back to the kitchen. It seemed Izuku was finally done with chucking his guts up, for now at least. Katsuki figured it would be best to get him back into bed with a bucket strategically placed on the floor beside him. He was going to take care of his boyfriend, but he drew the line at having to possibly change vomit-soaked sheets. There were some things even he wouldn't do for love. Re-entering the bathroom, he was pleased to see Izuku had propped himself up against the wall and was sat holding the damp washcloth to his forehead. Green eyes met red as Katsuki crouched to pass over the glass. Whilst Izuku drank, Katsuki took the washcloth to the basin to re-dampen it. We'll get you back to bed now, nerd, so long as you don't think you're gonna hurl again anytime soon. I'll grab you a bucket to be on the safe side. Hopefully you'll feel a bit better after a few hours, Kip. I'll go camp out in the spare room for tonight. Izuku whined, the pout coming back into place as Katsuki passed in the washcloth. Kachan, no. You need to stay with me. Nah, nerd, no F way. You're sweating literal buckets and you're probably contagious. I'm just hoping that you haven't already passed on whatever the F it is to me. I'd rather not spend my days off on all fours on our bathroom floor, thank you very F much. Izuku continued to pout and glare at his other half, the look softened somewhat by the rosy hue of his feverish cheeks and the small sips of water he continued to take. Katsuki turned back to him with a smirk, dangling the washcloth from one finger. Come on, Zuku. On your feet. It's sleep's time. He held out his free hand to help pull Izuku up. The greenette stumbled slightly, the mix of overtiredness and dehydration making him unsteady. He paused as the bathroom tilted slightly around him, holding onto Katsuki's hand like an anchor. Okay, Zuku. Take it slowly now. Let's not add a mild concussion and a broken nose to your current list of ailments. Izuku snorted, getting his bearings back and taking a few quick breaths to help steady himself. Yeah, I'd rather not break my nose. It's one of the few things I haven't broken before. Katsuki chuckled, leading him slowly by the hand. Exactly. Can't have you messing up that pretty face of yours. Even with his temperature through the roof, Izuku still felt his face warm as he blushed at Katsuki's words. The hot-headed blonde was not one to dish out compliments freely, so whenever he did, they went straight to Izuku's heart. Usually straight to his PP too, but that was just not appropriate for the current here and now. After a quick brushing of teeth to help Izuku get the nasty taste out of his mouth, and several more comments on how the puppy was going to help keep Izuku safe in bed, Katsuki guided him back to their bedroom, helping Izuku slide into bed as he flicked a bedside lamp on. He made a point of fluffing Izuku's pillows up to ensure maximum comfort. If he was forced to play nurse for the next couple of days, he'd make sure to be the best goddamn nurse in history. Okay, Zuku. Water is here on the table, and keep the cloth against your forehead for a bit longer. I'm gonna text the old man to let him know you won't be in tomorrow and to arrange cover for your class, K? Izuku gnawed at his bottom lip anxiously. He'd never called in sick before. He'd managed to get through almost 2 full years without a single sick day. It irritated him no end to break his good streak. "Oh, I'm sure I'll be fine tomorrow, Kachan. No need to bother him. I'll go in, it'll be okay." Katsuki just deadpanned at him, one eyebrow slightly quirked. "Really, nerd? Really? You've just spent the last hour practically face F the toilet? You've obviously got a bug of some kind. You really want to take it into school and spread it around the entire faculty? UA can cope without you for a couple of days. I don't think it would cope if every single DMN teacher ended up throwing up every 5 minutes. And anyway, you need to be clear of any vomiting for at least 48 hours before returning to a place of work. You know that as well as I do. Plus the fact it's F-in, half 4 in the F-in, morning. No way will you be fit enough to do much by the time your alarm goes off. So I'm gonna message the old man, you're gonna get some sleep, and I'm gonna go pass out in the spare room for as long as F possible, got it?" Izuku huffed, but nodded at Katsuki's words. He knew the blonde was right, but it didn't mean he had to like it. Katsuki grunted his approval at Izuku's acceptance, and went to grab the aforementioned bucket. Setting it down on the floor, he perched on the edge of the bed for a moment, taking Izuku's clammy hand in his and rubbing his thumb gently across his knuckles. Izuku offered him a small smile and squeezed his hand gently. He knew Katsuki wasn't entirely comfortable with the prospect of playing nurse for him, and he appreciated everything his explosive boyfriend was doing for him. "Thank you, Kachan. Sorry for waking you up. I know you had a late shift today. You must be shattered." Katsuki shrugged. "'S fine, nerd. No big deal. I know you'd do the same for me. Now come on, lie down and try to get some sleep, okay? I'm only in the next room if you need me. I'd rather you wake me up early so I can help you rather than you try and struggle on your own, K? MMMKAY Kachan. Promise, nerd?" Izuku gave him a small smile before linking their fingers together. "Pinky promise, Kachan." Katsuki laughed and squeezed Izuku's hand once more before standing up again. "Good. I'll see you in a few hours, Zuku." He went to grab his phone and charger before heading out to the spare room. Izuku lay back with a small sigh, glad his stomach had finally decided to settle down. "Night, Kachan. I love you." Katsuki turned as he reached the bedroom door, a soft smile gracing his face. "Love you too, Zuku." At least he seemed to have finally forgotten about the puppy. Katsuki flopped down face first onto the bed in their spare room. He was so done. Every part of him ached and he felt like he could sleep for a week. First things first though. Text Aizawa. Katsuki sat up with a small groan and pulled up his messenger app. "Bakugo. Hey Zawa. Just to let you know Izuku won't be in tomorrow or Friday. He's got some shitty sickness bug, an hour and a half hugging the toilet. Took some convincing to get him not to come in, but finally got through that thick skull of his. You cool to arrange some cover for his class and stuff?" It wasn't the most eloquent or polite message, but Katsuki was running on fumes now and simply did not have the energy for anything more than the bare bones. He plugged his phone on charge and crawled under the covers, sighing in relief as he finally felt himself start to relax. The buzzing of his phone immediately drew him out of his cozy cocoon of happiness. Swearing to himself under his breath, he cracked one eye open to scan through the reply he really should have been expecting, even at half 4 in the morning. "Dadzawa. No problem, Bakugo, thanks for letting me know. Make sure that idiot stays in bed and keeps his germs to himself. I'll cover his class myself. My lot are all away on work study, so his class can have the honor of my presence for a couple of days. Update me if anything changes, and I hope he's not too difficult a patient." Katsuki snorted in amusement. Of course Aizawa knew how difficult that little SHT could be when confined to a sick bed. They'd all had to deal with it during their years at UA. "Bakugo. Thanks, old man. He'll be pleased to know his precious brats are in your hands. I've got the next couple days off, so will do my best to keep him in line. Now get some sleep like the rest of us, ya DMN insomniac." Satisfied his duties were done for the night, Katsuki locked his phone and snuggled back down under the duvet, thanking every deity he could think of that they'd had the sense to get blackout curtains for both bedrooms. Hopefully he'd be able to get at least a few hours of sleep before Nurse Katsuki was back on duty. Katsuki awoke for the second time that day, although thankfully not to the background noise of Izuku throwing up in the distance. He stretched his limbs, feeling and hearing satisfying pops from his joints as he did so. Yawning, he picked up his phone to check the time and for any messages. 10:03 a.m. He'd slept for longer than he meant to. But seeing as how the apartment was quiet, he guessed Izuku was either still asleep, or just quietly resting in their bedroom. A soft meow drew his attention to the floor. Might sat by the bedroom door, tail flicking in impatience. Yeah I know. Late for breakfast. I'm coming ya DMN feline. Heaving himself out of bed, he made his way through to the kitchen, trying his best to not trip over the cat currently weaving his way around his legs. Sake cat. Move your butt. Don't wanna have to deal with an injured cat as well as a sickly nerd, dammit. Don't blame me if you get stepped on. Having both made it safely to the kitchen in one piece, Katsuki quickly filled Might's food bowl and replaced his water. The ginger menace quickly tucked in, and Katsuki flicked the kettle on to make himself some much-needed coffee. Whilst the water boiled, he used the bathroom and then went to check on Izuku. Peering round the door into the still darkened bedroom, he could faintly make out the sight of a lump of blankets, the only evidence of said lump being a person being green curls sticking haphazardly out of the top and across the pillow. Soft snores were coming from the sickly one, so Katsuki decided to make the most of this peaceful time to enjoy his coffee and sort himself out some food before dealing with a cranky Izuku. Katsuki had few vices in life. He considered his body a temple. He'd worked strong to ensure he was in constant prime condition in order to be the best hero he could, so he very rarely indulged in treats such as alcohol or sweets. But one thing he had discovered he really could not live without was coffee. That first caffeine hit of the day was like nectar of the gods to him. He found himself understanding why Aizawa always seemed to have coffee on hand. It perked him up, got his BLD going, ready to face whatever uppery that day was going to throw at him. Sometimes he only needed that first one of the day to get him going and keep him pepped up. Other days required more mugs of his chosen poison. He felt like today was going to be a bad day. He'd need a veritable buttload of coffee to get him through it. Throwing himself together a quick but edible breakfast, he downed his first coffee and started on the second. He figured he had enough time for a shower and change of clothes before having to deal with the sickly one. He ended up having enough time to not only shower and change, but also to clean the bathroom and stick a load of laundry on. If Izuku did have some form of contagious bug, Katsuki wanted to make DMN sure he deep cleaned anything and everything the nerd had come into contact with. There was no way in hell he wanted to come down with the same sickness. After sticking some rice on to cook, Katsuki headed back towards their bedroom. Izuku needed more water at the very least by this point, even if a dehydrated and delusional Deku was one of the funniest things Katsuki had ever witnessed, Pomeranian comments and all. Nurse Katsuki was officially back on call. Izuku was still curled up under the blankets when Katsuki went back into their bedroom. He was pleased to find the bucket empty. Perching himself back on the edge of the bed again, he gently pulled the covers back from over Izuku's head, taking a moment to check his temperature. He still felt somewhat feverish. Come on Zuku. Time to get up nerd. Let's get you cleaned up a bit He received a few mumbled grumblings in reply, the greenette trying to wriggle himself back down under the duvet. Katsuki chuckled and pulled it further away from him. Nah nerd, you need to wake up. You need a drink and we might risk trying something to eat, k? HNNGGH, cash on, nope, come on. Get your butt in gear. I can only keep up this nice attitude for so long it's making me feel all weird and twitchy and SHT. Izuku snorted out a laugh from under the covers, slowly pulling himself out and up to look at Katsuki. The blonde flashed him a quick smile. How you feeling? Like I went 10 rounds with Kirishima and then got finished off by Kaminari's indiscriminate shock. Katsuki rolled his eyes at Izuku's dramatics. Well then a wash and clean up should help you feel much better. I put some plain rice on to cook as figured that would be safest for now. He helped get Izuku up on his feet, taking him back through to the bathroom so he could freshen up a bit. He then stripped their bed and opened the window. He was in full-on domestic goddess mode. Those DMN germs didn't stand a chance against the great cleaning hero Dynamite. By the time Izuku was done in the bathroom, Katsuki had remade their bed, put out some clean clothes for him, and sorted the rice out. He forced Izuku to head to the kitchen first, wanting to make sure he got some water and food. If possible, into him before he crawled back to bed. "I know you feel shitty, but this will help. You know it will. The sooner you kick this bug's butt, the sooner you can get back to normal." Izuku huffed, but nodded his agreement, conceding that Katsuki was right, as usual. What did Aizawa say? "Told me to make sure you stay in bed and keep your nasty germs to yourself. He's covering your class so you got nothing to worry about. Those little shits will be just fine without you for a couple of days." Katsuki busied himself with cleaning up the kitchen, keeping one eye on Izuku to make sure he at least had a drink. He could see just the effort of washing himself and coming out to the kitchen had exhausted him. After a few small mouthfuls of rice and a drink, Izuku was swaying slightly in his seat, struggling to keep his eyes open. Katsuki clicked his tongue and went over to help him up. "Alright Zuku, come on. You did good. Let's get you back to bed, yeah? I put clean sheets on for you." Izuku hummed his thanks and leaned heavily against his part-and-a-half carried back to bed. He felt completely drained, like he had no energy whatsoever. Sickness bugs were the bane of his life, and he hated feeling so weak. He had to admit though, he was impressed so far by Katsuki. Usually the explosive blonde was the last person you'd get any help or care from. He was bad at both expressing his feelings and accepting other people's. Izuku was genuinely touched to be on the receiving end of such gentle and genuine care. Once Izuku was snuggled back up in bed, Katsuki left him to rest. There was plenty he could occupy himself with in the meantime. Izuku already seemed much improved from the early hours of the morning, so Katsuki was hopeful he was on the mend. Katsuki had never been so wrong in his life. A few hours later, just as he was preparing to go prod Izuku awake to check his temperature and see if he needed anything, the door to their bedroom flew open, and Izuku ran out in a blur of green, hands over his mouth as he beelined for the bathroom. Seconds later, the all-too-familiar sounds of retching reached Katsuki's ears. "Well F." He sighed, hanging his head in resignation before grabbing a glass of water and walking down the hallway to deal with the inevitable cleanup. He must have done something terrible in a former life to deserve this. The process was much the same: try and keep Izuku comfortable whilst he familiarized himself with the toilet bowl. Katsuki kept water and washcloths fresh on hand for when he was ready. After half an hour of on and off heaving, Izuku was exhausted, sniffling quietly whilst hunched on the floor, arms cradling his poor stomach. Ka-chan. Kashan, it hurts. I know Zuku, I know. I'm sorry babe. Come on, try and sit up for a bit, yeah? Lean on me." He gently helped Izuku up into a sitting position, leaning himself back against the bathroom wall to hold his partner in his lap. He continued to gently pat his face with the cool cloth, using his other hand to rub up and down one arm. Izuku continued to quietly sniff, too worn out to even cry properly. The pair of them stayed there on the floor for a time, Katsuki cradling Izuku and doing everything he could think of to try and help him feel better. It had been less than 24 hours since this all started, but they were both utterly fed up. Eventually Katsuki was able to get Izuku back up off the floor and into bed. The bucket was still on the floor, but clearly forgotten in Izuku's panicked flight to the bathroom. Katsuki made sure the greenette was as comfortable as he could be before heading back to clean the bathroom again. This pattern continued throughout the rest of the day. Every few hours, Katsuki would hear the telltale moans coming from the bedroom before they were followed by the splashes of something nasty going in the bucket. He'd drag himself back to Izuku's bedside, awkwardly trying to comfort him whilst the smaller man cried it out. He'd then get him settled back down before starting up the cleaning process yet again. There wasn't enough coffee in the world to deal with this. By the time 10 p.m. rolled around, Katsuki was grumpy, sleep-deprived, and utterly sick of the smell of bleach and other cleaning products. The washing machine and tumble dryer had been going practically non-stop all day whilst he did his best to keep the apartment as clean as he possibly could. He had no idea where all the vomit was coming from. Surely it must have all been out of Izuku's system by now? He just left the nerd settled once more after another round of fill the bucket, and flopped his butt down onto the sofa, letting out a deep sigh of sheer exhaustion. Grabbing his phone, he scrolled through his contacts, wondering who he could call on for backup. He didn't know if he could manage another night's worth of this, and he was so and tired, he wasn't above asking for help. Bakugo. Hey shitty hair. You still awake? A few minutes passed before his phone buzzed in reply. Shitty hair. Hey bro. Yeah, I'm still up. Only came off shift an hour ago. Surprised to hear from you at this time of night. Everything okay, dude? Katsuki scoffed. His friends never missed out on the opportunity to poke fun at his bedtime routine. Bakugo. Shut up, dickhead. Nah, I think I need help. Deku's sick. Like hugging the toilet bowl and becoming best friends with the bucket kinda sick. I'm effin' done. What do I do? Shitty hair. Aw SHT man, that sucks for poor Mado bro. Not a lot you can do really, I guess. Just be there with him and keep him comfortable till it passes. How long's he been puking? Bakugo. Since effin' 4 a.m. Every few hours like effin' clockwork. I dunno how he's got anything left to hurl up. Shitty hair. DMN bro. Sounds like you're both in for a rough ride. I salute you, soldier. Bakugo. Thanks, dickhead. Don't suppose you fancy babysitting the nerd then, huh? Shitty hair. Strong effin', no bro. A sick Madobro is an awful Madobro. I ain't dealing with that after a 12-hour shift. Sorry dude, you're on your own. Katsuki groaned, rubbing a hand across his face. He couldn't be too mad. Kirishima had been patrolling all day and was probably just as knackered as he was. He'd have to think of a plan B. Bakugo. Nah, that's fair man. Get your butt to bed. The way things are going over here, I'm gonna call his effin' mum. Shitty hair. That's probably the best idea you've had all day, dude. If anyone can deal with a sickly Mido, it's his mum. I wish you luck. Katsuki chuckled and switched over to his chat with Inko. They stayed in semi-regular contact, even more so since he and Izuku had officially gotten together. Their parents were the only people close to them who knew the pair were a couple. It was time to call in the big guns. Bakugo. Hey auntie. Sorry to bother you so late. Are you still awake by any chance? She took a little while longer to reply than Kirishima, but Katsuki felt somewhat relieved when his phone buzzed in his hand. Auntie. Hello Katsuki dear. I'm indeed still awake. Is everything okay? Are you and Izuku alright? At that, Katsuki decided to just bite the bullet and ring her instead. It would be easier. The phone rang only twice before Inko answered. Katsuki sweetheart. Are you okay? This is an unusually late call for you. Dear Lord. Even Izuku's sweet as honey mother wasn't above teasing him. Katsuki huffed with a small smile. I'm okay auntie. It's Zuku actually. He's sick. Oh dear, with what? Some kind of vomiting bug. He's been throwing up every few hours since 4 a.m. I'm doing everything I can think of, but honestly I'm absolutely shattered, and I dunno what else I can do to help. Katsuki always did his best to refrain from swearing around Inko. She was the only person who could make him feel bad about it. Oh you poor thing. And you were on a late shift yesterday weren't you? Izuku told me you'd be late home. You should have phoned me earlier. So no problem auntie. Didn't want to bother you if it wasn't necessary. Nonsense Katsuki. You two may be grown adults now, but you're still both my boys and I want to help. I know what Izuku can be like when he's sick. Not the easiest to deal with. Nah, he's like a whiny clingy brat all over again. Inko laughed lightly, in turn making Katsuki chuckle. Alright dear. Give me half an hour and I'll be with you. I'll just grab some things to bring with me. Auntie no. You don't have to do that. Shish now Katsuki. You need to make sure you get some rest as well. I'm not doing work until Monday. Let me come over and help okay? Katsuki sighed in resignation, his heart warming at the thought of Inko sweeping in to save the day. Thank you auntie. That would be great. Do you want me to come get you? No need dear. I'll get a cab. You stay there with Izuku and I'll see you soon okay? Okay. See you soon. Sure enough, half an hour later, Katsuki was buzzing Inko Midoriya into the building in the front door. She enveloped Katsuki into a big warm hug, an impressive feat considering he literally towered over her now. He smiled, wrapping his arms round her and just taking a moment to appreciate her presence. Inko had always had this magical ability to soften the hot-headed blonde, whether that be with her words or a simple hug. He fully understood where Izuku had gotten his gentle soul from. Thanks for comin' auntie. Sorry to haul you over here in the middle of the night. She shushed him, making her way into the apartment with bag in hand. Don't be silly dear. I know you're a big bad hero now and can take care of yourself. But someone needs to be there to take care of the heroes too. You know I'll always come if you need me." Katsuki smiled softly, already feeling a day's worth of tension melt away from his shoulders. Inko truly was an angel in disguise. "I'm guessing Izuku is in bed." She smiled at his nod. "Good. He can stay put for now. I'm going to cook up some of my special broth ready for when he needs it, and you young man, are going to go get some much needed sleep. I can see the bags under your eyes from here. Go on now. I can manage from here." "Are you sure, Auntie? I don't have work tomorrow either. I can still stay and help." "Nope." She stepped forward to grab him by the hand and tug him down the hallway. DMN, this woman had a strong grip. "Get your butt into the spare room and get your head down. I'll keep an ear out for Izuku and busy myself in the kitchen for now. I worked the night shift too, so I've already had my share of sleep today. I've got it covered, go on now." Katsuki laughed softly at her and reached up to squeeze her hand in gratitude. "You're the best, Auntie." "Thank you. I'll see you in a few hours. Wake me up if you need me though, 'kay?" Inko simply tutted at him and waved him into the spare room, turning to head back towards the kitchen. "I promise I won't, Katsuki." Katsuki was asleep moments after his head hit the pillow. The smell of warming broth and the soft sounds of Inko's gentle singing from the kitchen pulled Katsuki from the deepest sleep he had had in weeks. Stretching in bed and yawning, he grabbed his phone to check the time. 8:57 a.m. DMN. He'd slept for nigh on 10 hours. Padding down the hallway to the kitchen, he also then caught the enticing whiff of freshly brewed coffee. This woman was definitely some form of angel. Inko smiled at him as he appeared in the doorway, one hand ruffling his messy spikes. "Mornin', Auntie." "Good morning, sweetie. Sit yourself down, I'll make you a coffee." Thank you, yup. An angel in every sense of the word. As he sipped on his steaming drink, Inko filled him in on the night's events. Izuku had woken up several times, but had only thrown up the once. Inko was pretty sure things were finally starting to settle now. Apparently Izuku had bawled like a baby when he realized his mum was there to help him. That did not surprise Katsuki in the slightest. Inko made him some breakfast and insisted he stay put to eat it whilst she went to check on her son. Katsuki figured he would never be able to repay her enough. An hour later, Katsuki was showered and changed into clean clothes. Both Aizawa and Kirishima had messaged him asking how Izuku was, so he updated them before heading in to see the nerd himself. To his pleasant surprise, Izuku was sat up in bed chatting quietly with Inko whilst taking small sips of her famous homemade broth. He was still quite pale, but beamed as Katsuki entered the room. "Ka-chan." "Hey nerd. How you feelin'? Tired, but better. I think it's finally clearing up. How are you?" "Ma fine nerd. Your mum is a literal lifesaver mind." Izuku laughed softly, nodding in agreement. "I couldn't agree more. How would we manage without her?" Katsuki plonked himself down on the bed, reaching over to ruffle Izuku's curls fondly. "We wouldn't. Think I'd have been a blubberin' mess in the corner by now if she hadn't come over. Ma not cut out for this lookin' after people sht." Izuku laughed again, reaching over to grab Katsuki's hand. "You are amazing, Ka-chan. Thank you." Katsuki just grunted in reply, shrugging the compliment off. "So no big deal. Like I said, I know you'd do the same for me." Inko smiled as she looked between the two. "And I would absolutely come over to help if it was you in this bed, Katsuki. Trying to look after someone who is poorly whilst exhausted yourself is not an easy job for anyone. Please boys, both of you promise to call on me if you need help, okay? You know I'll be here in a heartbeat for either of you. As would your mother, Katsuki, although I understand her methods of comfort may not be quite the same." Katsuki barked out a laugh, nodding in agreement at Inko's words. Mitsuki was certainly not as soft and comforting as Inko, but she showed her love in other ways. Although if ever it were him with his head down the toilet, he knew he would definitely prefer to have Inko rubbing his back rather than his own mother. However, if he needed someone to help plan some form of revenge or assassination, Mitsuki was the woman to call on. The three of them sat together for a while, chatting comfortably and teasing Izuku about being the world's worst patient. To his credit, Izuku laughed along with them in agreement. It was so rare that he got badly ill, he struggled to know how to cope with it. Physical injuries he could deal with, but something like a stomach bug just spiraled him. To be fair, Ka-chan, You're just as bad as me when it comes to stuff like this. You hate being poorly. TCH. DMN straight Zuku. Why I try and keep myself as fit and healthy as possible. Ain't got time to be dealing with that CRP. Izuku hummed in agreement. That's very true, Kachan. You must have the immune system of a god by now. Katsuki laughed again, just feeling relieved that his nerd was finally back to something resembling normal. Ain't no DMN bugs gonna bring me down, nerd. Inko laughed at the both of them, standing up from the bed and taking Izuku's empty bowl. Alright, you two. I'm going to go take a nap. Need to bring myself back to normal daytime hours. We'll leave you in charge for now, Katsuki. I'll be up again in a couple of hours, okay? Sure thing, auntie. Let me go put fresh bedding on the spare for you though. Oh no need, sweetie, it's okay. You stay here with Izuku and just relax. It's your day off after all. I'll be just fine. How did Inko know his work schedule better than Izuku? Inko trotted off to wash the bowl before heading to the spare room. Katsuki shifted himself so that he was sat up against the headboard next to Izuku, taking hold of his hand as he did so. Inko had already explained she'd managed to get Izuku showered and the bedsheets changed again, so he figured he was safe from any germs now. You sure you're okay, Zuku? Need me to grab you anything? I'm good, Kachan, thank you, and I meant what I said earlier. You really have been amazing. I know this has been way out of your comfort zone, looking after the biggest crybaby in the world. Katsuki laughed, leaning over to place a soft embrace on Izuku's forehead. Wouldn't do it for anyone else, shitty nerd. Consider yourself lucky. Izuku returned the laugh, leaning down to rest his head against Katsuki's shoulder. I'm so blessed, Kachan. Who else can say they've ever had the great explosion murder god Dynamight cleaning up their puke and rubbing their back in sympathy whilst face first down a toilet? Think I'm one of a kind. Katsuki snorted, shoulders shaking with laughter. Effin' hell, nerd. You certainly have a way with words, huh? Well, it's like you always say. I need to keep this big brain of mine sharp. Using my words is very important, you know. Need I remind you of the G out last night? If I remember correctly, you couldn't even say the word shrubbery properly. I was dehydrated and hallucinating small dogs in our bathroom, Kachan. You really can't hold that one against me. I can and I will. Although if you ever compare me to AF in Pomeranian again, I may just have to blast your butt out the nearest window. Fair point, Kachan. You definitely have more Chihuahua vibes anyway. Why you little F in shit nerd basta, nah Kachan, no abusing the sickly one. I'll abuse whatever I want, you F in little SHT. Wah Kachan no, Kachan F in, yes. Okay guys. Let's take a break. Everyone go get yourself a drink and a bite to eat. Meet back here in 30 minutes. Dynamite. Don't touch that makeup, why hear me? Katsuki simply rolled his eyes and huffed a sigh of relief, rolling his neck and shoulders to ease out his muscles. He knew shoots like these were important in advancing his career as a pro, but goddamn did they take up a lot of time and energy. He hopped down off the makeshift stage, tugging at the tie around his neck. He needed a DMN drink of water and a sit down in a comfy chair. The morning seemed to have dragged on forever. A constant barrage of changing from one position to the next, swapping this outfit for another. He could quite happily call it quits and head home from here, but he knew his PR team would lynch him if he tried to bow out early. Especially seeing as how this whole thing had been put together to celebrate him finally breaking the top 10 in the rankings. He needed to play his part and make sure he looked as DMN good as he could. Shutting himself away in his dressing room, he allowed himself a moment to simply breathe. Just relax and let the stress roll away. This was one part of hero work he really did not enjoy, letting himself be paraded around a stage like a puppet, having others dictate how and where he would stand, what kind of pose he should hold, what he would be wearing, how his face should look under this particular lighting. He scoffed to himself and took a deep drink of water, allowing himself the simple pleasure of sitting in temporary silence with only himself for company. A peaceful pleasure that was all too quickly interrupted by his PA barreling into his dressing room, clipboard in hand. Dynamite, they've added some ideas to today's shoot that require you to change your outfit and work on your style. What the actual F twitchy pants? His name was actually Yuto, but Katsuki still insisted on coming up with nicknames for almost everyone around him. I know, It's a somewhat last-minute change to the scheduled plans, but I think they would work in your favor. How so? They plan on emphasizing your physique. They want to show you off to the world as the strongest, most badass pro hero out there. TCH. Don't need any DMN photos to prove that point. Have they not seen the most recent rankings? That's what this whole farce is about after all. Yee. Yes, Dynamite sir, but they want to further that dialogue. Emphasize on just how strong and badass you are. They know their audience, sir. I think it may be worthwhile giving them a chance to show their hand. Katsuki Tsked, refusing to meet his poor paw eyes whilst he contemplated this latest development. And how, exactly, do they want me to show off my style? Yuto swallowed nervously, eyes flicking between the clipboard in hand and his explosive boss. Well sir, they've managed to get hold of some smoke machines, indoor fireworks. I've seen something looking like rubble or damaged buildings out there. They really want to impress upon their audience just how strong and explosive you are. Katsuki laughed, taking another sip from his water bottle before looking his trembling PA in the eye. Alright then, let's say I go along with this recent development. Do you think it would be good for my image? Will the public like it? His PA nodded enthusiastically, his eyes lighting up with a strange sense of glee as he did so. Oh for sure Dynamite. They think adding a certain level of SXL appeal would endear you to many more people. Your fanbase is already very large, and the public in general seems somewhat, well, thirsty. This could only help you in the long run. Katsuki nodded, only half paying attention to what Yuto was saying exactly. He was preoccupied firing off a quick message to Izuku, letting him know the shoot was probably going to overrun. Alright then. Let's give the masses what they want. Yuto grinned brightly, quickly scribbling down several notes onto his clipboard. Sure thing Mr. Dynamite sir. I'll make sure they're ready and fully prepared. You do that. In the meantime, can someone bring me something to eat before I pass out in here? Oh, of course sir. Leave it to me, that's my man. Katsuki snickered as his ever-nervous PA scurried off in search of food for his boss. Too easy. A short time later, content now that he had been fed and watered, Katsuki found himself back out in the main studio, listening intently whilst one of the stylists gushed about how good he was going to look in the outfits they had set aside for this special shoot. He smirked a little, already foreseeing in his mind how this was going to go. Okay. You're calling it an outfit, which implies there's material or cloth of some kind involved, right? But there's not exactly much material there from what I can see. Lots of buckles and straps and… Why is that makeup woman grinning at me? What's she plannin'? Oh yes Dynamite, Aika-san will be making some slight adjustments to your current look. We need to dirty you up a bit, let's say. Dirty me up, the F? Well, the scene they're setting up over there is based on a rescue from a burning building. Lots of fire and smoke and ash, you see. So, dirty makeup it is. Katsuki blinked at her, giving himself a moment before pointing out the obvious. Rina. There's a reason I don't tend to be much use in fire rescues. I'm just the tiniest bit explosive. Remember? He popped a few sparks off from his hand to emphasize his point. Rina just shrugged him off with a cheeky grin. Pedantics Dynamite. Anyway, that's one of the biggest selling points you have. You're fiery, you're literally explosive. Seems like the perfect setup for you, I think. Plus the fans won't give two hoots what's going on in the background once we're finished with you. He quirked an eyebrow, suddenly feeling not quite as confident about this as before. He'd done plenty of photo shoots in the past, but they'd all been focused on his pro career, showcasing his latest suit upgrades, his progress through the rankings, and stuff like that. He'd been approached for steamier things, but it had never been anything that piqued his interest. The public wasn't interested in how he looked under the suit, they only cared about how amazing a hero he was and how many villains he could take down. Weren't they? What was it Yuto had said earlier in the dressing room? Something about being thirsty and sex appeal. DMN. He really should have paid more attention to the mutterings. He'd spent too long around Izuku. It was second nature to just zone out when the mumbling started. I'm gonna regret this, aren't I? Rina laughed, patting his shoulder. I'm sure you won't. You'll enjoy yourself. And I'm certain the payoff will be worth it. You know we'd never make you look bad, Dynamite. Near on impossible to really. You're practically made for modeling. Katsuki considered that for a moment. Yes, okay, he was going to be showing off a lot more of himself to the general public than usual, but Izuku was part of that audience. This could seriously work in his favor. He flashed a predatory grin then. Alright then, let's effin' do this. Katsuki was right to pre-warn Izuku about the shoot running over. They ended up spending nearly an extra 3 hours getting the perfect shots. Hair, makeup, wardrobe, scenery. Everything had to be changed and maneuvered around until the photographers were happy. They were practically vibrating with excitement behind the cameras. Finally someone had convinced Dynamite to get half naked in front of a camera. They were not going to waste this golden opportunity. Okay Dynamite. Just a few more and we'll be done. Can we have you leaning against that wall over there? That's it. Rina, can you adjust his top please? Maybe pull it down a tad further. Actually no, let's just remove the top completely. Rip it off if needs be, just leave some threads hanging. That's it, perfect. Okay Dynamite, imagine you've just finished one hell of a shift. Constant fires and screaming people everywhere. Lots of noise and mess. You're filthy, you're exhausted, half your costume is gone, but you're DMN proud of everything that's been achieved today. Cross your arms over your street and let's see that famous smirk. Katsuki didn't need to imagine the exhaustion too strong. He felt almost dead on his feet from hours of standing around, posing, being fussed over by innumerable stylists and designers. He wanted nothing more than a piping hot shower and to be able to head home to cuddle his nerd. He did as instructed though, arms crossed and face glowering towards the camera. Early on in the adapted shoot, the photographers had told him to tense his arms as much as possible, really highlight the size and strength of his muscles. The team had even added subtle makeup alongside the fake dirt and ash spread across his skin to help them stand out. Apparently his arms had their own special fanbase going. Who knew? That's it. Perfect. Turn slightly to the right. Lean more into the wall. Let's get one boot up on the piece of rubble just there. Katsuki could see Rina and Yuto grinning in the corner. He seemed to be making a lot of people very happy today. He just hoped the finished work would please a certain special someone. Fabulous, that's those done for now. I've just got 2 more poses I'd like from you. Then I promise you're free to go. Let's get that chair over to Dynamite please, and can someone add some extra moisture to his shoulders and upper arms? Dynamite, I need you to sit on the chair backwards facing me. Arms over the backrest. Someone appeared from seemingly nowhere, plonking a simple wooden chair down in front of him. He dutifully straddled it, leaning his arms over the back as instructed. One of the makeup team came over to dampen his shoulders and arms a bit. He'd be so glad when he could finally wash all this SHT off. Right, let's keep that scowl going. Rest your face against your arms. Show us how worn out you are. Eyes looking directly at the camera please. That's it. Lovely. Everyone there was pleasantly surprised at just how docile and well-behaved Katsuki was being over all this, especially considering how long the shoot had gone on for. The explosive hero was well known for his temper after all, and they felt for sure they were going to have to deal with a tantrum at some point. But no. Katsuki had done everything he was told to do with little to no complaint. He had drawn the line at removing his trousers though. He was not going to pretend to parade around a disaster zone in just his boxers. He knew this shoot was supposed to be just for some steamy fun and not realistic, but there was a limit. He took the chance to roll out his neck and shoulders whilst sat down in between the clicks of the camera lens going off. He knew the photographer would lap up any movements he made like that. Having a little freestyle posing was allowed. Perfect Dynamite, that's just perfect. You definitely know what you're doing. Okay, last one and then we're done. Let's move the chair out and get the lights angled up and down for the back shots please. Katsuki stood, barely suppressing a yawn as he stretched his entire upper body. Back shots? Yes. The photographer grinned, clapping his hands together for emphasis. Your back is the second most favored part of your body after your arms. The public go wild for those lats. Katsuki just blinked at him, momentarily stunned into silence. They effin', what now, my back? Huh? Rina came over to him, eyes twinkling with laughter as she circled round him to ensure his back was in a photo-ready state. Yes Dynamite, you're back. God, you really don't pay attention to socials do you? Well, No, there's never anything important I need to know about that hasn't already been passed on to me. That's half the reason I have a F in PA. Why the F would I be interested in what some extras think of my DMN back? The arms I get, they're my F in weapons after all, but my back? Really? Rina simply shrugged in reply, moving in to tighten a buckle on his trouser legs. Surely there's physical aspects of some people that you admire? Face, arms, legs. Something? For a lot of people, that admiration is all for your back, sweetie. They know what they like. Katsuki paused to consider her words. He'd never really put much thought into it before, but of course there were certain features of people he admired. Kirishima, for example. His upper body strength was bordering on insane, and he had the abs to prove it. Jiro had appealing, almost elegantly long fingers, perfect for when she was playing guitar or writing. Siro's arms were crazy toned from constantly working with his tape, SWNGNG himself between buildings and carrying people. And Izuku, well, where did he begin? As a mental image of his nerd began to form in his mind, Katsuki could feel the tips of his ears beginning to burn. Oh no. It would not do to blush and potentially pop a BNER on set. Nah, no way. Quickly, stop that train of thought right F now. Too late. He was seeing those deep glittering green eyes sparkling at him, full lips curled up in a mischievous grin. Those strong as F thighs wrapped around his waist, holding on for dear life. Nope. Stop the DMN perv train already. Katsuki coughed to try and cover up his embarrassment at almost drifting off into dirty dreamland. Running a hand through his disheveled spikes and letting out a huff of irritation, Rina glanced up at him, smirking as she quickly twigged the sort of thoughts running rampant in his head. Well, she quietly whispered. Seems the big tough Dynamite has a soft spot for someone. Shut it, Rina, he answered through clenched teeth, darting his eyes down to glare at her for a second. Don't say a effin' word. Wouldn't dream of it, darling. And don't worry, I'm not going to pry. I've known you for too long and you make us too much money for me to risk pissing you off. She winked at him, unable to resist a slight tease. Katsuki simply rolled his eyes and huffed again. He liked Rina, she was good at her job and knew how to handle him, even on his worst days. She was one of the few people he hadn't given a nickname to. He would even go so far as to say he respected her. She also knew when to keep her mouth shut. Katsuki knew that even if she figured out who he was thinking about, she wouldn't say a thing. Respect was a two-way street. Rina softened her smirk, reaching up to pat her hand lightly on his arm. In all seriousness, Dynamite, if there is someone special, I hope they know how DMN lucky they are. And I'm happy for you. You deserve it. And I promise that no word of this conversation will pass my lips. Katsuki met her eyes again, giving the tiniest of nods to show his thanks. Rina gave his arm one last squeeze before turning back to the waiting photographers. Okay guys, he's good to go. Let's get this thing wrapped up to get to. Katsuki let himself be positioned, back towards the cameras, hands in pockets, feet slightly apart, and the smallest smirk gracing his features as he looked back over one shoulder. The hot spotlights were aimed up and down it and around him, ensuring he was the focal point in a sea of otherwise dimly lit destruction. He held himself up straight, arching his shoulders back ever so slightly to ensure those, apparently idolized, back muscles were right on show. The makeup team had once again done a deft job of highlighting all the right areas, even going so far as to ensure his several scars were also on prominent display. Katsuki was proud of those scars. He'd gone to death and back, and those scars were his marks of victory. He didn't mind showing them off in the slightest. He could hear the photographers practically drooling over the end result, cameras clicking like crazy. Excited whispers were echoing around the studio. The team knew they were really onto a winner here. The public reaction was going to be insane. Katsuki felt his smirk grow, a slight hint of canine peeking out from his lips. He knew his body was in the best shape it ever had been. He'd worked strong to develop and maintain his physique. He had insanely good willpower and restraint when it came to what he would and wouldn't eat or drink. He made sure to get in some form of workout every day, and he planned his exercises down to a T, wanting to make sure it was all perfect in order to keep himself as fit as possible. The end result was an intensely strong body, abs and other muscles tightly defined. His legs were long and toned, waist small and slim, his upper body filling out with pure muscle. He needed to keep himself both strong and aerodynamic in order to get the best out of his quirk. He'd also been lucky in the genetics department. He'd been blessed with his mother's sharp but handsome looks, as well as her smooth and unblemished skin thanks to their nitroglycerin-based quirks. Deep red eyes and spiky ash blonde hair brought the final piece together to make up the physical artwork that was Katsuki Bakugo. He knew he was good-looking, and he knew he was strong, but this photo shoot had made him realize a lot more about himself. He'd never been one for self-deprecation, but this had only boosted his confidence even further. Surely there was nothing wrong with feeling slightly smug over the knowledge that people were fawning over him? Not that it mattered anyway. Pro-hero Dynamite was a taken man, even if the world didn't know it. Yet, with a few last compliments and flashes from the cameras, Katsuki was finally allowed to retreat. He made a point of going over to thank the photographers and other members of the team, knowing everyone had really put in the extra mile today. He gratefully accepted a robe from Reunited to wrap himself up in as he made his way back to his dressing room to shower and change. He pinged off a quick message to Izuku to let him know he was done for the day, then got himself ready to head home. He had a nerd to squeeze. Kachan less than 3. Hey Zuku. Finally finished. Gonna get cleaned up and head home. See you within the hour. Izuku. Yay Kachan. I've missed you. I hope it was fun though. Looking forward to seeing the end results laughing face. Kachan less than 3. Same here. Better be worth being so laid over. Izuku. I'm sure they will be. Kachan always looks good in photos. Was there a theme or anything? How come it ran over so late? Kachan less than 3. You'll have to wait and see nerd. I'm not spoiling the surprise. Izuku pouted down at his phone, knowing that Katsuki would be sat there with that cute little smirk on his face. He thought it was just another run-of-the-mill photo shoot to celebrate Katsuki breaking the top 10. Probably lots of victory poses and the like. But Katsuki said it was a surprise. What did he mean by that? Izuku. Me and Kachan, making me wait. Don't I get special behind-the-scenes previews or anything? Pout. Kachan less than 3. Nope. You'll just have to be patient. Now let me go shower. I want to get home already. Izuku. Okay Kachan. See you soon. Laughing face 4x Izuku turned his attention back to the papers he was marking, trying his best not to think about what sort of photos had been taken today. It was unusual for Katsuki to be so secretive about these things. Usually he would just scoff at him about how it all been a lot of fluff and posturing just to show him off. He'd at least give Izuku a hint of what had been done. But not today apparently, and Izuku hated waiting. He was soon able to distract himself with his students' coursework, eyes skimming the pages and pages of support item analysis. He'd given his class the task of choosing a hero who used support gear, and then writing a detailed essay on how they used it, why they used it, where it had been manufactured etc. And his students, as always, had gamely risen to the task, providing in-depth discussions and breakdowns. They really were all doing so well. Before he knew where the time had gone, their front door was opening and Katsuki was stomping his way into the apartment, boots discarded by the door. Hey Zuku. Mahome. Kachan. Izuku looked up from where he was hunched over their dining room table, pen in hand and beaming smile directed straight at Katsuki. I missed you. TCH. I know nerd, you already said so. Katsuki smirked and sauntered over to Izuku, big arms coming round to wrap him from behind. He buried his face into the juncture between Izuku's jaw and shoulder. Missed you too, he muttered into the green curls. Izuku hummed happily, turning his face to the side so he could plant an embrace on his boyfriend. How was it in the end? Hope you weren't too grumpy with it overrunning so late. Rina deserves better than a moody Kachan. Katsuki snickered, lifting his head enough to return the embrace before sliding off Izuku's shoulders and heading for the kitchen. I'll have you know I was on my best behavior. And it was fine. Rina and Yuto kept everyone in line. All went really smoothly actually. Even though we were late, they had a change of plan, so everything had to be changed up for the second half. A change of plan? How so? What do you mean? Katsuki stuck his head round the door, eyes narrowing slightly. Nah nerd. Nice try. I ain't sayin' SHT. But Kachan, nope, give it up nerd. My lips are sealed. Izuku huffed with a pout, standing up to follow Katsuki into the kitchen. So mean Kachan. I'm your boyfriend, surely that gets me some advantage here? Nope. Izuku paused in thought for a moment, watching as Katsuki went from fridge to cupboard, grabbing ingredients to start working on dinner. His partner was in a suspiciously good mood, bordering on cheeky. What had happened at that shoot? Kachan. I'm guessing from your behavior that you had fun then. Yup. And the fact you're not telling me anything about the shoot means it's going to be a nice surprise? For me? Maybe. It was Izuku's turn to narrow his eyes, his mind suddenly reeling with possibilities. A cheerful, yet somewhat cagey Katsuki was intriguing. Had the photographers somehow coerced him into doing a shoot that wasn't quite so standard? Something outside of the norm? Images of a half-naked Katsuki draped across a chaise lounge suddenly entered Izuku's mind, making the green-haired man let out a small squeak as a blush steadily covered his cheeks. Katsuki glanced over at him, lips curling in a grin when he saw Izuku's face. Dirty-minded nerd. I know exactly what you're thinking right now. Get out of the gutter, you menace. Izuku settled for sticking his tongue out in response, trying his best to wipe his mind clean. Well, maybe if you just told me what to expect, I wouldn't jump to the wrong, or are they right, conclusions. Katsuki just laughed, pulling forward some vegetables to prepare tea. Gonna happen, nerd. Give it up already. You'll see him when they're ready. Izuku sighed, giving up for now. Katsuki was quite possibly the most stubborn man on the planet. There was no way he was going to give Izuku anything if he chose not to. But he would not give up completely. Izuku Midoriya was nothing if not relentless in his quest for knowledge. Over the next few weeks, whilst he agonizingly waited for the photos to be officially published, Izuku tried everything he could think of to get the information he so desperately craved. He offered Katsuki bribes, made whispers of sweet things in the bedroom, even promising to do that thing with his tongue that the blonde so enjoyed. But Katsuki stood firm, refusing to bend to any of Izuku's wily ways. It had become almost a game now, a competition between the pair of them to see if either would cave. It was a game Katsuki was determined to win. Plus he could not wait to see Izuku's reaction firsthand, that would be much more fun. Izuku even tried roping in members of the Baku squad to dig up some details, under the pretense of explaining that Katsuki had come home from the shoot in a very odd mood, and Izuku was simply concerned as all, wanting to make sure his best friend was okay with whatever had happened. But Katsuki wasn't stupid. As soon as Mina, innocently, mentioned the photoshoot in conversation, his defenses were up and his mood stoic. Nope, absolutely not. He was not letting anything slip. Izuku silently seethed, frustrated that none of his plans were working. He didn't even know when the photos were due to be released. His impatience and curiosity were insatiable. Finally, about 6 weeks after the event, Katsuki arrived home from his shift with a somewhat chunky folder in hand. It was a Saturday, so Izuku was already at home. He was curled up on the sofa with Dynamight, watching a rerun of an old All Might documentary. He looked up as Katsuki entered, smiling at him in greeting. Welcome home, Kachan. How was your shift? Long and boring. Katsuki toed off his shoes and dumped his bag down on the floor, sliding over on slippered feet to plonk himself down next to Izuku. After greeting Dynamight with the required statutory chin scratch, he lifted the folder over to hand to Izuku, smirking slightly. Present for ya, nerd. Izuku took the folder, eyebrow lifting in question. A present? For me? Why? It's not my birthday or anything. No, but these are hot off the press today, and figured you'd want a glimpse before they go public. Consider your patience rewarded. Eyes widening in realization, Izuku flipped the folder open, Dynamight jumping down from his lap with a small huff. Inside was a stack of stunning A4-sized printouts from Katsuki's photoshoot. Izuku positively vibrated off the sofa with excitement. Katsuki grinned to himself as he watched Izuku examine the photos one by one. He had to admit, the photographers had done a fantastic job. The first half of the shoot, his official celebration of finally reaching top 10, looked amazing. They'd captured him in all his fiery glory. Every inch of his hero costume showed off to the max. He'd also had a few shots done in formal wear, just to add some variety to the mix. He certainly knew how to work a tailored suit, there were definitely perks to having fashion designer parents. Izuku immediately launched into a spiel of how amazing his Kachan looked, how well he had posed and been made up. He complimented the quality of the photos, eyes poring over every detail. He beamed at Katsuki, nudging him with glee as he yammered on about how they were a great representation of him, and a fitting way to celebrate Dynamite. Katsuki just hummed and nodded in agreement. Izuku was fast approaching the second half of the shoot. He'd already looked through the photos himself back at the agency, making sure to tuck the best ones away at the back to save for last. Sudden silence descended over the apartment as Izuku came across the first photo. In it, Katsuki was stood against a backdrop of explosions, half his suit ripped away from his street, and ash smeared across his face and arms. He was looking away from the camera, braced as though about to take off in flight. Izuku blinked, stunned for a moment. He let out a nervous little giggle and looked up at Katsuki. "Wow, Kachan. They actually convinced you to show some skin?" Katsuki snorted, just nudging Izuku to continue going through the photos. Izuku turned back to the pile in his hand, taking his time now as he revealed more and more of Katsuki's steamier work. Katsuki swallowed, suddenly feeling a twinge of nerves. What if Izuku thought they were too much? What if he didn't like the thought of his boyfriend showing off more than the usual amount of his body to the world? Would he be okay with these being published? Maybe he should have discussed it with him first after all? Izuku, however, simply felt his mouth go dry as he examined the photos, Katsuki gradually losing more of his clothing and gaining more dirt and sweaty sheen as the shoot went on. He eventually came across the ones of Katsuki leaning against the wall, arms crossed over his naked street as he glowered at the camera. Oh my Kachan. That's very, something you wanna say, Zuku? Not like you to be lost for words? Izuku frowned at him briefly before gluing his eyes back to the photo in front of him. It's just. You've never done anything like this before. I've never known you be so willing to show this much of yourself. It's. Katsuki held his breath for a moment, his concerns about Izuku's feelings coming front and center. Maybe this had been a mistake. It's really hot, Kachan. Katsuki's breath escaped in him in a relieved wheeze. A small chuckle following at the rare sound of Izuku cursing. Hot, huh? Well, that's kinda the look I was going for. Check out the next one. Pulling the next photo out from the pile, Izuku's eyes widened even further at the sight of Katsuki draped nonchalantly over the back of a chair, face resting almost peacefully on the swell of his upper arms. The gleam in his crimson eyes told Izuku that there was nothing peaceful about Katsuki at that moment in time, though. He knew that glint in his eye better than anyone. That was Katsuki's come to bed look. Fuck. F me, Kachan. Wah. Who? How did they get you to do this? I owe someone a very big thank you. Katsuki laughed, feeling his insides warm and his frantic heart calm as he watched the blush steadily creep up Izuku's face. His nerd was clearly feeling a bit flustered. Yuto and Rina are the ones to thank, really. The photographers had the ideas and the setup. It was those two that convinced me to go for it. Izuku let out a big breath, nodding in appreciation without taking his eyes off the stunning scene in front of him. I owe them big time. He came then to the end of the collection. The last few photos in the folder were the ones done at the end of the shoot, Katsuki's backshots. As apprehensive and shocked as Katsuki had been at the revelation of people thirsting over his back of all things, he had to admit he could kinda see where they were coming from. The combination of the right lighting, Katsuki's pose, costume mostly gone, and his stylishly messed up hair and makeup all came together to create a picture that was, quite simply, breathtaking. He watched Izuku's face carefully, keen to see his reaction. Izuku froze, barely blinking as he looked through the several shots of Katsuki taken from behind, some full length, others zoomed in to capture just his upper body and head. He'd never admitted it to the blonde, but Izuku loved Katsuki's back. It was a literal physical representation of just how strong Katsuki was, his muscles tight and defined in all the right places. It was almost flawless, marred only by the Futsuki's upper body. But Izuku loved those too, and knew Katsuki wore them like a badge of honor, as he rightfully should. Katsuki grinned to himself in victory, knowing Izuku's silence said a lot more than his words ever could. He poked the nerd gently in the arm. Earth to nerd. You still in there, Zuku? You look like you've short-circuited or something. Kachan. Yeah? Kachan. Yes, Zuku. Kachan, I am unwell. Huh? I am unwell, Kachan. Glittering Viridian snapped across to amused Scarlet. I am unwell and need to go to bed. You need to take me to bed right the F now, Kachan. Katsuki wasted no time in removing the photos from Izuku's grasp, standing and reaching to pull Izuku up to his feet and then slinging him bodily over one shoulder. Izuku squealed in surprise, then took the chance most graciously offered to him to run his hands down Katsuki's back, dragging his fingers across the planes of muscle as Katsuki speed walked to their bedroom. If he took his time mapping out every inch of Katsuki's naked back, taking great pleasure in the feel of his skin and the tensing of his muscles, that was nobody's business but Izuku's. 2 weeks later, the photos went public, published in one of the top hero magazines alongside an interview Katsuki had later sat down for. And they went viral fast. Social media was rampant with people thirsting over the images, comparing Katsuki to godlike beings. Whole blogs were created in celebration of the photos, people clamoring to save copies and discuss in detail everything that could, and everything that could not, be seen. It was unbridled chaos. Katsuki found it all highly amusing, finally understanding what Rina had meant about his fans on social media. Who knew that someone's back could cause so much insanity? Izuku silently preened to himself, content in the knowledge that not only had he been the first person outside of the shoot to see the photos, but also in being the only one who could physically get his hands on every single gorgeous inch of the pro, anytime he wanted. He'd sent a massive bouquet of flowers to Rina in thanks for this generous gift. He'd left them unsigned. Just a short simple message expressing his gratitude at her convincing Katsuki to do the shoot. Rina had laughed her head off when she received them. The Baku squad took great joy in teasing the hell out of Katsuki. Denki kept asking him for signed prints. Eiichiro teared up when expressing how manly Katsuki was to be so brave and bold to do a shoot like that, and Mina kept asking who his stylist was, as they must have some magical power in their makeup brushes to make him look that good. Katsuki just scoffed and rolled his eyes at them, taking it all in good stead. They also all begrudgingly admitted that it was the best DMN set of photos any of them had ever had done. A few nights after the photos had been released into the wild, Katsuki came into their bedroom to find Izuku sprawled out on their bed, a few of the more steamier shots in hand. He'd taken to looking through them any chance he got. Katsuki sighed, sitting down on the bed beside him. Zuku. You must have those burned into your DMN retinas by now. I'd almost be inclined to say you're obsessed. Izuku grinned up at him, waving one of the close-up back shots in his face. Can you really blame me, Kachan? I mean, come. Look at you. Are you saying you wouldn't be just as bad if I'd done a shoot like this? You'd be prying them out of my cold dead hands. Exactly. Just let me enjoy them. Although I was thinking, maybe we should get them laminated. Laminated? Yeah. You know. To keep them pristine and stuff. Don't want them getting damaged or wet or anything. Katsuki looked at him with a deadpan expression. Izuku. How the F would they get wet? You can't shower with them, ya perv. Especially not when you've got the real thing right F in here. No. Not shower. Obviously I'd never take them into the bathroom, Kachan. That would be silly. No. These are for the bedroom only. You know, for when you're away on a mission or something. Izuku, big green eyes blinked at him, a look of angelic naivety on Izuku's face. Don't try and play innocent with me, you dirty F-er. I know exactly why you want to get them laminated. So they're wiped clean, huh? Jesus fuck. I really do live with a perverted menace, don't I? What happened to the sweet little broccoli boy I went to school with, huh? He met you, Kachan. So your fault, really. You sullied me, ruined me beyond repair. You cheeky little SHT. Izuku sniggered, putting the photo down to flop himself across Katsuki's lap and look up at him. But I'm your cheeky little SHT, right, Kachan? Katsuki harumphed at him, running his fingers through silky green curls. DMN straight you are. No one else would put up with such a filthy-minded nerd. And I don't think anyone else could handle such an explosive, foul-mouthed, insanely toned demigod such as you. Katsuki glowered at him, bringing his face down to bump noses with Izuku. Alright Zuku, I get the point. I think it's about time you put that filthy mouth of yours to better use, huh? Guess you're right there, Kachan. Izuku ordered a laminator online the following day. The sounds of clinking glasses and laughing voices echoed around the room, music carrying over the noise of everything else. It was loud enough to be enjoyed, but not quite so loud that you couldn't hear yourself think over it. Katsuki sat NRSNG a soft drink at the bar, crimson eyes gliding across the crowd of idiots he called his friends and classmates. Nearly everyone from Class A was present, the couple of exceptions being those that were either out of the area or unable to get their shifts covered. It had taken a lot of organizational mayhem to get as many of them as possible together in one room for one night. He doubted it would be happening again anytime soon. His gaze landed upon a small group standing slightly off to one side, the four friends huddled together and listening intently as Izuku Midoriya regaled them with some tales of recent antics his class had gotten up to. He was talking at about a mile a minute, one hand holding onto his ridiculously fancy and far too fruity cocktail glass whilst the other gesticulated around in the air as he told his story. The three stood with him, pink cheeks, icy hot, and four eyes, looked to be deeply invested in whatever wild tale he was spilling, nodding and laughing along in all the right places. Ochako had a slight blush to her already pink cheeks. She was obviously enjoying the open bar a little too much. Shoto stood as impassive as ever, the only sign of his interest in Izuku's story being the fact his eyes never drifted away from the green-haired man before him, and his lips quirking in something resembling a smile every now and then. Iida, of course, was fully engaged, asking lots of questions and nodding along enthusiastically. Katsuki smiled softly to himself as he took a sip of his drink. That group of nitwits were usually a bit too much for him, but he knew how special they were to Izuku and how close the four of them were. It made him happy to see his favorite nerd enjoying himself. Enjoying himself maybe a tad too much, judging by the now empty glass in his hand and the slight sway to his stance. Katsuki himself had opted not to drink that night, preferring instead to keep a sober head and be designated driver. He was working the following day as well, and trying to patrol and take down villains whilst NRSNG a hangover was not his idea of a good time. Even on the nights out where he did drink, he would never have more than 2 or 3. Alcohol just wasn't a big deal to him. He didn't need it in order to have fun or give himself confidence. Izuku wasn't a regular drinker either, but aimed to let loose a little and enjoy himself tonight. A class reunion was special after all, and he wanted to relax with his friends. It was 5 years since they had graduated from UA and headed out into the real world. The majority of them had all stayed in touch with each other, the bonds formed through everything that happened in their school years staying strong. Izuku was the only one from their class that had not continued on as a pro hero, but he had had no choice in the matter really, not after losing OFA. He wasn't resentful or sad though, not anymore. When he had first felt the last of those weakened embers flicker out into nothingness, he had shut himself away in his dorm room for nearly a full week, just letting himself scream and cry in the darkness to get it out of his system. It took several days and Katsuki physically blasting his door down to get him out and back into something resembling a normal routine. For a long time afterwards his sparkle was dulled, his usual enthusiasm giving way to quiet contemplation and mournful moping. The rest of his class had rallied around him, providing as much support as they could in the form of hugs, steaming mugs of hot chocolate, and ensuring that he was never left out of any activities where possible. Katsuki had taken it upon himself to keep Izuku in training, making sure they sparred at least 3 times a week. Just because he was once again quirkless, it did not mean that Izuku needed to give everything up. Providing him with a physical outlet for his rage and resentment at the quite frankly shitty hand he had been dealt in life was Katsuki's way of showing him some support. As usual, it was the blonde's actions and not his words that were most helpful. Just a few short years later, the pair of them realized that their relationship was something so much more, something that went beyond the usual ties of friendship. It had been scary for both of them, slowly coming to the realization that their love for each other was more than platonic. It felt inevitable, but at the same time so unerringly weird. Katsuki especially had never put much thought into relationships with other people. His focus was entirely on making himself into the best and strongest hero he could, determined to one day reach that #1 spot. Having a partner, possibly marriage and kids and all that jazz, had simply never been on his agenda. But as with so many things in his life, Izuku had proven to be the exception to the rule. Said nerd was currently heading his way, tottering back towards the bar with a beaming smile on his face. Shoto followed along quietly behind him, keeping one eye on Izuku to ensure he didn't trip over his own feet. It wouldn't have been the first time. "Ka-chan, there you are you having fun?" Katsuki smiled softly, nodding his head in silent greeting to Shoto as he did so. "Sure nerd. You doing alright over there?" Yup. Chako was telling me all about this insane rescue mission she went on a few weeks ago. There were loads of kids involved. Apparently they'd managed to uncover this whole network of child trafficking and stuff. It sounds crazy. Like a mission that lasted literally months. No wonder we've barely seen her lately. I'm so pleased she's here tonight. I've missed her. Katsuki nodded again, impressed. Oh yeah, I'd heard about that. Pretty effin', full on. Fair play to Cheeks. Izuku beamed, hauling himself up onto the bar stool next to Katsuki. "Whatcha drinking, Ka-chan? My turn to get around in." "I'm alright for now nerd." "Okay, Shoto? I've still got half of mine left Izuku. I think it's just you and Ochako that need refills." "Ooh. Okay." Whilst Izuku busied himself with the barman, trying to explain the unnecessarily complicated cocktail he had chosen, Katsuki turned back to Shoto. "So, how's things with you icy hot? Managed to max out any more of Endeavor's credit cards yet?" Shoto snorted gently, a rarely seen smile gracing his features as he took a sip from his glass. "Only about 3 since the last time we spoke Bakugo." Katsuki laughed, raising his own glass in salute. "Fair play. He bollocksed you for it yet?" "No, surprisingly, he doesn't really seem to care. I think he's just pleased that I even bother giving him the time of day now, to be honest. And that I've agreed to take over the agency eventually." "Wow. Didn't think you were gonna go for it if I'm being honest. What happened to being independent and breaking away from the Todoroki name?" Shoto simply shrugged. "It took a lot of convincing from my family. I spent a long time thinking over the pros and cons. In the end, it was my mother that really pushed me to make that final decision. It would be a lot easier than trying to set up my own agency, of course. Everything is already set up and in place. It will be minimal work to just change things over to my name. Plus this way, I can be my own boss. Will be nice not to have to answer to someone else all the time." "God, that sounds like a effin' dream. I thought you were planning to set up your own agency too, Bakugo? You're still working with Kirishima and Ishido at Fat Gums, correct?" "Yeah, still there. It's not terrible, Fat's a great boss and we have a good team. Just wanna get out there on my own now, you know. Like you say, be my own boss kinda deal. But it takes a SHT ton of money, and a load of time that I just don't have right now." Shoto nodded sagely. "It's certainly something to strive for. I'm sure you'll do it eventually. You've never backed down from a challenge before after all. And if you ever want a helping hand with setup, please do get in touch. I'd be more than willing to help out." Katsuki quirked an eyebrow at him, genuinely and pleasantly surprised at the offer. "Well, thanks icy hot. That's decent of you to offer." Shoto just shrugged in response again. "I don't see the point of having money and some level of influence if I can't put it to good use for my friends. I've got the Endeavor name behind me. May as well try and use it for good where I can." Katsuki smiled and nodded his agreement, a silent understanding passing between them. Shoto was easily one of the most generous benefactors when it came to raising funds for the hero suit they were planning for Izuku. He was as keen as any of them to get Deku back out where he belonged, and was not shy about digging deep into his pockets to help however he could. He and Katsuki had never been close per se, but the blonde had come to deeply appreciate the two-toned man, knowing that he too was more often than not a man of actions rather than words. They also both held deep love for the green-haired man sitting beside them, and knew that they would both do anything for him. In that moment, Izuku spun round on his stool to face them both again, taking a deep sip through the straw of his ridiculous-looking drink. Katsuki blinked at him, eyes darting down to look at the brightly colored monstrosity in his hand. "Effin' hell nerd. Think there's more decorations in that thing than our entire apartment." Izuku giggled. "But it's so yummy, Ka-chan. You want to taste?" "No thanks. I feel like I'm getting diabetes just from looking at it." Izuku just giggled again, reaching back to grab Ochako's drink. Shoto deftly reached in and plucked it from his grasp. I'll take it over Izuku. You sit here for a bit. Okay Shoto. Shoto merely blinked and then shook his head lightly. Good luck Bakugo. Yeah. Thanks. After Shoto had walked back over to the other two, Katsuki turned back to Izuku. Think you better slow down a bit with the fancy cocktails Zuku. You're already plastered. Manat. Slurp. Hey. Yeah you are. I ain't carrying you out of here later when your legs don't work cause you've F your balance up. Nah. I'll be fine Kachan. I can hold my liquor. Ent. Remember Mina's last party? Huh? Which one? Exactly. Point proven. Izuku blinked at him in confusion. Katsuki simply snorted and patted his curls. Don't worry about it nerd. Just be careful, k? Ma always careful Kachan. And I'll be okay. Kachan looks after me. Slurp slurp. Katsuki sighed, resigning himself to probably having to deal with a very intoxicated Izuku in his near future. Yeah nerd. Kachan will look after you, as usual. Izuku beamed around his straw at him, reaching one hand over to pet him on the thigh. That's cause Kachan's amazing. And don't you forget it. The night continued on in much the same way. Several members of their class getting steadily more and more drunk, whilst those of them like Katsuki who had opted for a dry night, just watched on with a mixture of amusement and horror. They may all be fully grown adults with professional jobs, but give them just a sniff of alcohol and all the wild sides came out to play. Denki was currently stood on a chair, drink in hand, singing along, badly, to a power ballad currently being blasted through the speakers. At some point in the evening, someone had managed to get the volume cranked up high, and it took mere moments for the electric blonde to start trying to organize some form of karaoke contest. Mina was trying to coax a reluctant Eiichiro into slow dancing with her, whilst Jiro, Tsuyu, Izuku, and Ochako stood in a line together off to one side of the impromptu dance floor, arms slung around each other's shoulders as they swayed and warbled out the lyrics alongside Denki. Katsuki was leaning up against a wall, a safe distance away from the drunken mess in front of him. Shiro stood beside him, laughing his head off as Denki nearly fell from the chair for about the fourth time. Oh man. I've missed this lot. We really don't get to do this often enough. Katsuki scoffed, looking at him incredulously. You seriously want to have to clean up after those idiots more than once in a blue moon? Rather you than me tapes. Shiro snorted, taking a sip of his drink. He too had opted for soft drinks as he was on shift the following morning. I'll let them have their fun dude. For some of them, it's the first chance they've had to really relax in months. Yeah I know. I'm just not looking forward to scraping Izuku off the ceiling at some point. Yeah. I heard about the sickness bug incident. Sounded pretty horrendous. Katsuki shuddered. God, don't remind me. I swear no one should have that much vomit in them. I dunno where it kept comin' from. Shiro laughed again, punching him lightly on the arm. From what Kiri told me, sounds like you really stepped up and were a super manly bro. Even if you did have to call on Mrs. Midoriya for help in the end. Izuku's lucky to have you as a roomie. And he better not effin' forget it either. If it ever happens again, I'm checking into a hotel for a week or something. Auntie can deal with him. That's fair. Remember that time he had flu in our third year? Oh sweet effin' hell. Yes I remember it all too well. He was a nightmare. Doesn't cope very well with being ill does he? Abso-F-lutely not. They continued to watch the drunken spectacle in front of them, both howling with laughter when Denki eventually, and inevitably, fell off the chair. Iida was immediately at his side, helping him to his feet whilst at the same time scolding him for being so reckless. Apparently not even a few drinks could get their class representative to relax even the slightest bit. The fursum swaying off to one side suddenly ended up all on the floor, Ochako apparently having tripped over her own feet and pulling them all down with her. The cackling and giggling from around the room only intensified, Mina especially struggling to contain herself as she held onto Kirishima's arm with a death grip trying to steady herself. Denki collapsed back down onto his butt, eyes streaming with tears as he laughed uncontrollably at the sudden cuddle puddle to his left. From where he stood, Katsuki could just make out the shape of Izuku, currently being suffocated under a giggling Jiro. But he could also hear the nerd laughing, so figured he wasn't dead quite yet. Oh my f god. They're a mess. Katsuki nodded at Siro's words, shaking his head in disbelief at the utter chaos unfolding in front of them. I don't remember signing up for this SHT tapes. How the F are we gonna get them all out of here in one piece? Your guess is as good as mine, dude. Maybe we can ask Todoroki to put ice blocks on their feet so we can just slide them to the cars or something? Might be worth a shot. The two-toned hero suddenly appeared beside them as though summoned. Who am I freezing and why? Katsuki pointed to the giggling mess across the room, them. Shoto quirked an eyebrow, taking a sip of his drink. He was on the vodka tonight, but apparently had more control, or a faster metabolism, than the rest of their group. He seemed barely affected. Oh, okay. Any particular reason? So we can get them out of here as easily and quickly as possible, Siro answered. I think we'll have a fight on our hands if we try and pry them away from the bar too soon. Valid point. Okay. Well, just shout if you need me. Happy to lend a hand. As quickly as he had appeared, he was gone again. Before Katsuki had had time to blink, he suddenly had an armful of Mina, Blasty. Hey Pinky. What's up? Ooh, nothing much. A won't dance with me though. You'll dance with me, won't you? No effin' way. Akamoon, not effin', happenin' Pinky. She pouted up at him. Why aren't you drinking tonight, huh? Bet after a few voties you'd get on that dance floor with me. Katsuki shook his head. Nah, I wouldn't. I don't do dancin', and I'm not drinking cause some of us have work tomorrow. Not until the afternoon. Not the point. Someone also has to make sure you lot don't fall in the river or some SHT when you stagger out of here. Wouldn't be wantin' that on my conscience. Mina sighed, hands on hips. Fiend, we appreciate your sacrifice, oh explosive one. Siro laughed beside him. I'd like to see you dance, Bakugo. Bet you've got some moves. Shut up, tapes. Ain't happenin'. Oh, we know he's got moves, Siro. You saw those photos, right? Blasty knows just how to flex. Katsuki rolled his eyes, inwardly praying for someone or something to just strike him down right there and then. Sake Mina. You're not still going on about that DMN article? Baku babe. Everyone is still talking about it. You're hot SHT right now. Didn't know you had it in you to look so DMN fine. Think you've given half of Japan a case of serious gay panic. Katsuki barked out a laugh, just shaking his head. I highly doubt that, Pinky. Nah. I've heard and seen the things being said. You've turned our adoring fans into dribbling messes. Heck. You've turned half our class into drooling idiots. We all know you're hot as F, but those photos took it to another freakin' level, babe. I know for a fact Izuku hasn't shut up about them all night. Katsuki blinked at her. He what now? Mina grinned, winking at him. Rumi seems to have plenty to say about those photos. He's been rubbing it in our faces tonight that he got advanced viewings of them. Katsuki groaned and let his head thump back against the wall behind him. F me. Nah. Isn't that Izuku's job? He shot his head forward again to glare at her, ignoring the wheezing laughter coming from the man beside him. Watch it, Pinky. Mina just shrugged, completely unperturbed. What? I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. How long you gonna keep it a secret, him? You're not Mbarawa. No. No, it's not like that. Okay. So, are you two just F? Or are you actually together? I've been wanting to ask this question for years. I'm bored of waiting. Come on, Blasty, tell me. Katsuki groaned again, running one hand across his face whilst he contemplated his answer. He'd known this was going to happen eventually, but he was rather hoping that it would have been at a time of his and Izuku's choosing, and preferably when Izuku wasn't falling down drunk either. But if Izuku had been running his mouth about those DMN photos all night, and had probably not been subtle about what he thought of them, Katsuki likely had no choice but to tell Mina the truth. Mina. This really isn't how I wanted this SHT to go down. Zuku's plastered and probably saying SHT he doesn't mean. Mina hummed thoughtfully, one perfectly manicured nail tapping her chin. I dunno, babe. Alcohol tends to bring out the more honest side of people. You lose your inhibitions a bit and tend to say stuff you wouldn't be brave enough to when sober. I think he's just finally feeling like he can be a bit freer about telling people how he really feels about you. Honestly, it's kinda cute. She's right, Siro interjected before Katsuki could reply. There's been rumors going round for months, if not years, mate. You two are joined at the hip. You grew up together, you live together. You're even nice to him, on a level that you aren't with anyone else. Just think about the conversation we were having earlier about how well you looked after him when he was sick. I can't imagine you doing that for anyone else, not even Kiri. You can tell us, man. No judgment here, you know that. We're your friends and we support you. Yeah, Mina added, smiling widely at the now very anxious blonde. Seriously, you two make the cutest couple. I'm calling dibs on being your best woman. Whoa. Slow down, Pinky. Just hang on. Let me think for a second. Katsuki ran a hand through his hair, taking a few deep breaths to calm himself down. Looking across the room, he could see Izuku back on his feet, arm in arm with a giggling Ochako. He was chattering away again, showing her something on his phone. Katsuki had a sinking feeling that he knew exactly what they were looking at. Izuku had the website with the photos and article bookmarked after all. He sighed, turning his attention back to the pink menace in front of him. Okay, fine. Fine. Just keep it to yourselves for now, alright? We've kept it quiet for a effin' reason. That reason being, we don't everyone gettin' all up and in our personal business. You know how effin' nasty the media can be. I've just hit top 10, and Zuku's focusing on his students. The last thing we need is effin' journalists hounding us at every turn wanting to know all the ins and outs of our relationship. Mina squealed with joy, clapping her hands together and pulling him into a tight hug. Oh my god, so you are together? Like, together? As in boyfriends? Katsuki chuckled, giving her a squeeze before nodding. Yeah, he's my effin' boyfriend, okay? Zero whooped in celebration, lifting a hand to high-five him. Yes mate, so happy for you dude, best news I've had all year, honestly. Mina nodded in agreement, finally freeing Katsuki from her tight hold. Same here babe. Honestly, I've wanted this for you for so long. I do wish you had told us sooner though. How long have you guys been official? Well, just over a couple of years actually. Years? Aw damn it Baku babe. I thought we were closer than that. Can't believe you didn't tell me, aren't I your bestie? Mina, it's not like that and you know it. We didn't tell anyone except our parents. And even that wasn't until a few months in. It just never felt like the right time, okay? I promise we were gonna share eventually. She pouted slightly in response, then shrugged. Fair enough babe. I get it. Are you gonna tell the others at least? Please for the love of all I hold dear at least tell A. He's gonna be pissed enough that I found out before him, and you know I can't keep something this big from him. Yeah okay. I'll talk to him in a bit. Just don't tell anyone else, alright? Promise. Thanks. Mina grinned and pulled both men back into a tight hug. Love you so much Blasty. I really am happy for you. And for Izuku too of course. He's one lucky BSTRD. Katsuki laughed, arms wrapped around the pair. He wasn't usually a hugger, but he knew there was no way he was getting out of this one. Make sure you remind him of that when he's sober. Choco, look at those arms. Just look at them. I am looking, and Izuku you're drooling, can you blame me? I have to live with this man. I have to see this every day. I dunno how I haven't passed out from lack of oxygen yet. Ochako laughed, shaking her head at her clearly besotted best friend. Oh Izuku. You do make me laugh. I will admit though, Bakugo's arms are certainly a sight to behold. How does he even get them so big? Insane weightlifting regime. He has a timetable set up and everything. Like, on a spreadsheet. The man's a beast. Bet he gives really good hugs too, oh the best. And kisses too huh? MMMHMM. Yup, Ochako smirked. Gotcha. Izuku, him? He looked up at her, forcing himself to tear his eyes away from his phone for a second. Bakugo kisses you often does he? She watched as realization dawned on her friend's face, the all too familiar strawberry blush creeping up his face. Oh. Well, he. Ochako laughed, pulling him in for a hug before he self-combusted. Don't worry Zuku, she whispered. Your secret is safe with me. Izuku gulped, quickly putting his phone away to return the hug. He could feel himself sobering up by the second. Oh, thanks, Choco. I really didn't mean to say anything. It's kinda a secret. I know sweetie. She pulled back and looked at him, squeezing his arms gently in reassurance. Honestly though, everyone's been asking the question for some time now. We've all been wondering if there's something going on with you too. Everyone, you know what these guys are like for rumors. I know for sure Mina is going to be grilling Bakugo at some point soon, maybe even tonight. They both looked over in tandem to where Bakugo was leaning up against the wall with Shiro. Sure enough, a giggling Mina was stood before him, clearly interrogating him over something. Izuku could see the faint panic on Katsuki's face. He turned back to Ochako. Oh dear. She giggled, looping her arm through his before tugging him back towards the bar. Come on you. We need more alcohol for this. I couldn't agree more. You promise you won't say anything? Of course I won't. You've asked me not to, and I never go back on my promises, Zuku. I understand why you want to keep it quiet. Although this does mean you owe me all the juicy details. Chako, nah greenie. You're not wiggling out of this one. I'm your best friend. I need all the gossip. I'm his best friend too. I want to hear the gossip. The pair jumped slightly as Shoto suddenly appeared next to them, quietly sipping from his drink. Izuku moaned and covered his face with his hands as Ochako started laughing again. Does this have something to do with the betting pool? The what? Ochako screeched with laughter, doubling over. Oh my god, Shoto. You weren't supposed to mention that. But am I wrong? No. No you're not. Izuku groaned again, hands coming up to cover his face. What even is my life? Shoto took another sip of his drink, Heterokrazuku closely. A great source of entertainment for Ochako apparently. Oh god Shoto. Sweetie. Please stop, you're killing me here. Oh, I'm sorry Ochako. I never meant to cause you physical distress. Bahahaha. I need that effin' drink, Izuku muttered, resuming his march towards the bar, a giggling Ochako and somewhat confused Shoto following. Shots. Ochako announced as they reached the bar, slamming her hands onto the wooden top with a gleeful look in her eyes. Let's do shots. Anything. Give me anything to make me black out and forget this night ever happened. Ignorance is bliss, right? Oh stop being so dramatic Izuku. It's really not that big a deal. It really is Ochako. My life is over. No it's not, it's only just beginning. I am unable to pass judgment here, as you are yet to spill the tea Izuku. Both Izuku and Ochako swiveled their heads to look at Shoto with disbelief. Spill the, where did you hear that one show? Shoto shrugged, placing his empty glass down. One of the sidekicks says it a lot. I finally figured out what it means and thought I'd test it out. I'm still unsure about it. Ochako snorted with a shake of her head, and set to ordering them a selection of shots. Izuku sat with his head in his hands whilst Shoto patted him awkwardly on one shoulder. It's okay Izuku. You're amongst friends here. Friends who are apparently determined to ruin me. Oh no Izuku. We only ever want to help and support you. If anyone is going to ruin you, surely it's Bakugo, correct? After another round of howling laughter from Ochako, Izuku face-planted the bar, cursing every deity in existence that he had to suffer through this. Shoto was quite possibly the most socially awkward person he had ever met, yet he had a way of getting right through to the heart of a situation with such bluntness. He was never even fazed by it. Apparently Shoto didn't understand what embarrassment even was. Ochako pushed several shot glasses towards them, raising her first one up in a salute to Izuku. To our favorite green bean. May he continue to smash for the rest of his days. Oh for God's sake Ochako. The girl simply grinned as she downed her glass in one hit, the boys quickly following suit. Izuku shuddered as the alcohol hit the back of his throat. Shoto simply blinked and hummed to himself. That was tasty. Ochako snorted. Are you even human Sho? Shoto contemplated this for a moment, head tilted comically to one side. Honestly, at this point, I'm not really sure myself. Even the barman joined in their laughter at that one. 5 shots each later, the three of them found a sofa tucked away in a corner to curl up on together to make an Izuku sandwich. The green-haired man had finally calmed down a bit, and found he was willing to talk to his 2 closest friends a bit more about his current situation. MMMKAY. Okokok. So, Su, Yazuku. Ochako poked him in the side, eliciting a small giggle. Come on. You promised me juicy things. I need the tea Izuku. Okok, 1 second. Let me rearrange my brain. Hang on. The other two patiently waited whilst Izuku allowed the fog of alcohol to dissipate slightly. He knew roughly what he wanted to say, but 6 shots of pure vodka were making him a bit fuzzy. Okay. So, Ka-chan and we live together, right? Uh-huh. Yeah, and we've known each other for, like, forever rrr. You have indeed. Yeah. Right. So, anyway, Ka-chan has really nice arms. We already discussed that Zuku. I have to agree, Bakugo's arms are a thing of beauty. Wow, show. Rare for you to dish out compliments like that. Credit where credit's due, Ochako. I think the vodka is giving me loose lips. Okay. Carry on, Zuku. So Bakugo has nice arms. That has been firmly established. How do we go from there to you two shag? Hush, shish. Izuku waved his hands frantically at her. No one else knows, Chako. This is a secret, K? You hear that, Shoto? No spilling these beans to anyone else? Okay, Izuku. I shall tighten up my loose lips, just for you. Thank you. Okay. Where was I? How did you end up shacking up with the most explosive man in history? Ah yes. Thanks, Chako. Okay. Well, I guess it started a couple of years after graduation. Obviously we were already living together. Just made sense. Saves on rent and stuff. Plus he helped me with my teacher training. He's a very good tutor, you know, he's really smart. Uh-huh. Continue. Everything was just going really well. We had a routine. He'd go off to do his hero stuff. I go between home and school to get my teaching degree. Everything was peachy keen jelly beans. I passed my final exams, he had a few days off from work, and so we decided to celebrate. I am guessing there was alcohol involved here? Of course there was, show. Fantastic. Please go on. We had a few drinks and were just chillin'. Had some music on and were just mucking around in the flat, really. Somehow ended up dancing around the kitchen in our pajamas. Ah, that sounds so cute. I can't imagine Bakugo dancing. Or wearing pajamas actually. Izuku grinned at Ochako, feeling his face warm. He doesn't dance very often, and certainly not out in public. But I guess he feels safe and comfortable around me or something. I dunno. But yeah. We were dancing and just having a laugh. Things had been a bit tense for a while leading up to that. I'd been stressed about my exams, and he was having a rough time with a case that was just dragging on and on. Plus I think we'd both started to realize there was something going on between us, but neither of us understood what it was. Like SXL tension, yeah, show. Yeah, I guess it was. It was weird. Not uncomfortable or upsetting. Just weird. Anyway. We were dancing in the kitchen, in our pajamas, and next thing I knew, we were dancing together. Clarify please. Like, together. He was holding me as we danced. Ooh, I see. Uh-huh. We had the music set to shuffle, and it came on with some slow sappy love song or something. I can't really remember now. That was a complete lie. Izuku knew exactly which song it was, and he would listen to it whenever he was in a bad mood. It was always guaranteed to bring a smile to his face. But those two didn't need to know that. He smiled softly to himself, fingers toying with the hem of his shirt, and then, yeah. We just kissed. It just happened, like a natural thing, and it was perfect. Ochako sighed, her head coming down to rest on Izuku's shoulder and her arm reaching across in a half hug. Oh Zuku, that's so freaking adorable. You two are just the cutest. Izuku let out a quiet laugh, taking her hand in his and squeezing lightly. Thanks, Chako. Honestly. He makes me so happy. I've loved him for the longest time, I realized. Took me a while to figure it out, but we got there in the end. Shoto gave him a smile, reaching over to add his hand to the joined pair. He squeezed them both, laying his own head down onto Izuku's other shoulder. I'm really happy for you, Izuku. I think we all hoped this would happen one day. It just seemed inevitable somehow. I think you two are just meant to be. Izuku felt himself gulp and sniffle slightly. You're not actually the first person to say that, show. I'm not. Izuku shook his head. No, a few weeks ago, when Ka-chan came to school to visit with my class for the morning, we met up with Aizawa first in the teacher's lounge. He'd already figured us out and just said so, straight to the point as always. He asked us how long we'd been together. Thankfully Kachan did all the talking. I was way too flustered to think straight or form actual wording very similar about certain people being destined to be together. He understands it and was really pleased for us. Plus it meant he was able to spoil Eri with a new wardrobe with his winnings. His winnings? What do you mean? Oh, apparently the teachers had a betting pool going as well. Seems like the only people who were oblivious to Kachan and I were. Well, me and Kachan, I guess. The other two laughed, Izuku joining in. It felt like a great weight had finally been lifted from his shoulders by being able to tell his two closest friends about him and Katsuki. He completely understood the need for them to keep it quiet, but he hated keeping things from his friends, especially when it was something that made him so happy, made him feel so complete. Knowing that they knew and accepted it made his heart dance. By the way, did either of you two know Aizawa and present Mike are married? Say what now? Oh, no, I didn't know that particular tidbit. Is there more tea to be spilt? So much tea show. Where's the nerd gone now? I think I saw him over by the bar with Uraraka and Todoroki a short while ago, bro. Oh, for F's sake, the last thing that idiot needs is more alcohol. I'll let him be, bro. He's having fun, and if he's been having a conversation with them that is anything like the one we just had, then I think he deserves another drink or three. Yeah, Kiri, I get it already. Seriously though, dude, I still can't believe you kept this from me for over 2 years. 2 freaking years, man. And I said I'm sorry, didn't I? Stop getting your effin' panties in a twist. You know now, so just shut up about it. I'm still calling dibs on being best man. Katsuki sighed, feeling a lot more tired and worn out than he had just half an hour previously. Whatever you say, shitty hair. Kirishima grinned, bringing a big hand over to clap Katsuki on the back fondly. Ah, bro, I'm so proud of you. Confessing your feelings to the person you love is the ultimate sign of manliness. It is, bro. I bet Mido cried. He cried, didn't he? TCH. Of course he did. Sobbed like a baby. Effin' crybaby nerd. Kirishima laughed. Oh, Mido, bro. Never change. Katsuki smiled then, completely in agreement with his friend. As much as he bitched about it, he really didn't mind Izuku's tendency to cry over the slightest thing. It was kinda cute after all. And it more than made up for Katsuki being an emotionally constipated butt at times. They balanced each other out. Alright, I'm gonna go find the idiot and take him home anyways. I'm effin' done with tonight. Fair play, man. Hey. I meant it, by the way. I really am happy for you both. Kirishima smiled sincerely up at him as Katsuki got to his feet. You two are awesome, and I'm so glad you're together. And yes, I promise to keep my mouth shut about it. I'll make sure Mina stays stumm too. Katsuki grinned at him, reaching out for a fist bump. Thanks, man, I appreciate it. Anytime, man. You know I'll always have your back. Katsuki headed off in search of his nerd. It didn't take him long. He soon came across the pile of sleepy drunk friends piled onto the sofa in the corner. Ochako was out cold, head lolling on Izuku's shoulder with her hands wrapped up tightly in his. Izuku wasn't far behind her by the looks of things. Eyelids drooping and a yawn slipping out every few seconds. Only Shoto still looked somewhat alert, heterochromatic eyes blinking up at Katsuki as he approached. Oh, hi Bakugo. Hey, I see hot. I've come to collect the green menace. It's home time for us. Is that Kachan? Shoto reached up to poke Izuku lightly in one side. Bakugo's here to take you home, Izuku. You need to let go of Ochako now. But she might float away. I promise she won't. I'll hold on to her, don't worry. MMMKAY show. Come on, Zuku. Up you get. Katsuki took Izuku in hand and tugged him to his feet, steadying him with a hand to the waist as the smaller man stumbled slightly. Geez. How much did you guys drink whilst I was gone? A few shots of vodka, Shoto replied, shimmying across the sofa to take Ochako in arm before she face-planted the cushions. It was Ochako's idea. They were very nice, I have to say. I'm sure they were. Made my tummy warm cakin'. That's good then, seeing as you left your coat at home. The vodka jacket can keep you warm. Yup. Katsuki chuckled, wrapping one strong arm around Izuku's waist to hold him place. Alright then, nerd. Let's get out of here, EH. Say good night to Icy Hot. And night show. Thanks for being awesome. Anytime, Izuku. Take care and message me tomorrow once you've recovered, okay? MMMKAY show. With one last wave to Shoto, Katsuki turned and started steering Izuku towards the exit. Not for the first time, he was glad he had a decent height and size advantage over his boyfriend. Made moments like this all the more easier to handle. He nodded at their classmates in passing as they left, echoing their goodbyes and nudging Izuku to do the same. He saw several of them watching the pair as they walked past, knowing glints in their eyes. He sighed inwardly, just knowing there was going to be money changing hands the second they were out the door. Mina ran over to stop them just as they reached the exit. Izuku smiled and gave her a small wave. Hey Mina. Hey babe. Just wanted to give you both a quick hug before you left. I've given out more than my share of hugs tonight, Pinky. Stop being greedy. Mina chose to ignore him, instead leaping in to wrap the pair up in a tight hug. I love you both so much. I'm so glad you came tonight, and, you know, I'm just really happy for you. Katsuki rolled his eyes whilst Izuku stuttered out a few mumbles in reply. Mina simply shushed him with a quick wink. You boys get on home now. Blasty. Make sure Greenie here has some water before he falls into bed, okay? I know the drill, Pinky. This ain't my first drunken rodeo. I know. I just care about you both is all. We'll meet up again soon, yeah? Do dinner or head down to the bar or something? Sure thing. It's been nice catching up. She grinned at Katsuki, pleased that for once he seemed amenable to her socializing plans. Sweet. All right. Safe drive home, babes. Love you lots and see you both soon. Bye, Mina. We love you too. Katsuki rolled his eyes as he finally got Izuku out the door and heading towards their car. He could have sworn he heard loud cheers erupting from behind them as they left. Izuku was having a bad day. Scrap that. He was having a terrible day. Surely it couldn't get any worse. It had all started when he had slept through his alarms again. He honestly didn't know how he did it. Some days he was wide awake before his alarm was even going off, jumping up and out of bed ready to face the day. Other days, most of the time actually, he managed to snooze his way through every single one, not even twitching in response to the noise. It would take Katsuki whacking him round the head with a pillow to get him to wake up. Which really wasn't good if Katsuki had been on the night shift. Then he had a severely grumpy Kachan to deal with. But Katsuki wasn't there today. He'd been away for several days, almost 2 weeks now, helping out with a mission over in Tokyo. His backup hero alarm was not present. And Izuku was suffering the consequences. He missed his Kachan. Izuku hated it when Katsuki had to travel somewhere away from home for work. He was a needy nerd, and didn't mind admitting it after several days without his boyfriend by his side. The bed felt too big, the apartment was too quiet, and Izuku was feeling all kinds of pent-up frustration. Prior to being in a relation, UKU had never been too fussed about the SXL side of things. He'd suffered through the same teenage angst and hormones as everyone else, but it wasn't until he and Katsuki started actively and regularly sleeping together that he had realized just how good it could be and how much fun it was. He was proud to admit that they had a very healthy sex life, and being temporarily celibate whilst Katsuki was away was nothing short of torture. Going solo was nowhere near as satisfying. He'd finally extricated himself from his bed for a shower after Minnie Might had pounced up onto his face, loudly protesting about his empty food bowl, only to find upon entering the bathroom that the hot water wasn't working. Apparently there was an issue throughout their entire apartment building. No one had hot water for at least the next few hours. Izuku had never showered so fast before in his life. At least the cold shower had fixed his other issue. He'd gotten himself dried and dressed in record time, and then come out of their bedroom to discover Minnie Might has decided to forego the litter tray, and had instead left him a stinky little present right under the Christmas tree. Izuku had cursed out loud, stomping over to clean up the mess and glaring at Minnie Might the entire time. Someone was on the naughty list this year. He was then left with just a few minutes to feed his BSTRD of a cat, down a mug of coffee, and grab his things to head out to UA. No time for breakfast, again. Kachan would have been so mad. He made it to the train station just in time, squeezing himself into the packed-out carriage just as the doors were closing. As the train sped through the city, Izuku took a moment to assess himself and make sure he had everything he needed. Tie.
He'd forgotten to put on a tie. God fucking damn it. His internal Kachan voice was really coming to the fore today. Oh well, going without a tie was the least of his concerns right now. He'd just have to try and pull off the smart, casual look. The train finally arrived at his stop, and Izuku wasted no time in hopping off and speed walking the few minutes up to Ua. By the time he reached the gates, he was feeling flushed and out of breath. He'd chucked on his winter coat as it was ball-bitingly cold outside in the freezing December weather, but he regretted it somewhat now that he was overheating. A few minutes later, he was shrugging his coat off in his office, leaning over to turn on his coffee machine. Thankfully he'd left the already graded paperwork at school. The way his day was going, he just knew he would have left them behind if he'd had them at home. All of a sudden, sparks started flitting out from the machine, a suspicious sizzling sound and the smell of burning plastic wafting through the room. Izuku yelped and quickly leapt over to turn it off at the wall before it exploded or something. Great. A new coffee machine was going on his Christmas list then. Izuku sighed in defeat. It was too late to run over to the teacher's lounge and grab a coffee from there. He needed to be in homeroom within the next few minutes. Normally he'd just take his coffee in with him, sipping on it periodically throughout the first hour. But now he would have to go in almost caffeine-free, dealing with a room full of rowdy teenagers. Deep joy. Sighing in defeat, he grabbed the necessary paperwork, and headed out into the hallways of Ua to greet Class 2B. Surely the day could only improve from here on out. Teenagers sucked. Teenagers sucked absolute donkey pp. Izuku had walked into his classroom, forced smile painted onto his face, only to be greeted with the sounds of frenzied arguing. Apparently he had interrupted some very important discussion on whether or not Mirko should retire already, and step aside to let someone younger and with all their limbs fully intact take her place. Izuku loved his kids. He really did. But days like today were not the time for them to be arguing over something so trivial. Okay you lot, settle down please, but she's so strong, and more than capable of kicking more villain butt for the next few years. Nah, no way. There's only so long those prosthetics can hold out for. Mirko is a goddamn legend, have more respect you heathen. Prosthetics are replaced easily enough anyway, she's getting on in years isn't she? Surely it's better to bow out with your dignity still intact? Mirko is a goddess amongst heroes. Just because she has some prosthetic limbs, does not mean she is incapable of being a hero. Enough. The entire class was stunned into silence, unused to hearing their sensei raise the volume of his voice so high. 20 pairs of eyes flicked forward, eyeballing Izuku as he took position behind his podium, breath heaving and hands slammed down onto the wooden desk. Okay you guys. I really appreciate your dedication towards hero analysis, and fully understand why you were discussing that particular topic, but school has now started for the day and I need you to focus on me, okay? Yes sensei, came the general muttered reply. Izuku sighed, rubbing one hand tiredly across his face. Good, okay then. Let's get started. No empty seats I see, that's good. I've got your papers here, Riku, can you please take them and hand them out for me? Thank you, once again, I was very impressed by your work. I really appreciate the effort you all put into these essays. As I've said before, achieving good grades and excelling in intellectual pursuits is just as important as physically honing your skills and quirks. There's so much more to being a successful hero aside from being strong and looking good. Now there were some areas in which some of you slightly fell short or went off topic, but I have highlighted those for you and we can discuss them together. The rest of the hour went reasonably well. His class went through their graded papers and asked all the right questions when querying where they had gone wrong in their analyses. Izuku gradually felt the stress of his chaotic morning melt away, mind busied with helping his students and focusing on whatever they needed. All too soon, the bell rang to announce that homeroom was over and the students needed to head out to their next classes. Izuku waved his students off and readied himself for the next group. Izuku was exhausted. There must be something in the air today. Every class he'd had in, the teens were bratty, argumentative, questioning his every word. It was almost like they knew he was close to his breaking point, and were determined to push him nearer to the edge more than ever. Several times he had had to stop himself from outright snapping at them, trying his best not to let his temper get the better of him.
Maybe Kachan had a point when he said it was better to just let it all explode out rather than keep it bottled up inside. Lunchtime was his escape. Izuku flopped himself down onto a sofa in the teacher's lounge, letting out a massive sigh of relief and rubbing at his temples with his fingers. He needed caffeine, stat. Rough morning, kiddo. Izuku cracked one eye open to peer blearily at the loud blonde in front of him. Present Mike, Hisashi Yamada to his friends and co-workers, stood before him, sipping from a steaming cup of something. You could say that, Hisashi hummed, opting to flop himself down onto the sofa next to Izuku. We all have them, little listener. Some days are better than others, ya dig? Hopefully tomorrow will be 1,000 times better than today. Yeah, I know. I'm just, I've had the worst morning and honestly, I just want to go home right now. Ah, come on Izuku. It can't have been that bad. Lay it on me. Get it off your street? Izuku let out a little laugh, removing his hands from his face so that he could look over at Hisashi. Where the hell do I start, Hisashi? I often find that starting at the very beginning. Swazuku chuckled and nodded in agreement. Okay then. Well, I managed to sleep through every single alarm. Finally woke up when Dynamight jumped on my face demanding breakfast. The entire apartment block has some issue with the plumbing, so I had to have a cold shower. Then discovered the DMN cat had not used his litter tray, so then I had that to deal with. I forgot my tie, the train was packed, my coffee machine decided to blow up on me, the kids have been absolute morons all morning. And I miss Kachan. Bakugo. He's working away in Tokyo and I have no idea when he'll be home. I'm just done Zashi. I'm tired and fed up and grumpy and I want Kachan home. And I need the largest cup of coffee in the universe. Hisashi hummed in sympathy, one hand coming across to pat Izuku on the arm. Well, you've managed to make it to lunchtime, kiddo. That's a start. And honestly, you're looking just fine without a tie. A minor inconvenience at best. You're doing okay, kid. Never let one bad day out of the thousands you've made it through so far make you feel shitty, okay? And don't let it put a dampener on the many more amazing days yet to come. It's a new day tomorrow after all. Izuku hiccuped slightly, already feeling the tears threatening to fall. Thanks Zashi. I know you're right. It's just, not having Kachan around is really strong. I feel like I've lost a limb or something. He's always there to balance out the good from the bad. Always there to remind me of good things and to bring me back down to earth. I think if I had a day that I knew he would be home, I'd be okay. But it's the not knowing that makes it harder to deal with. He can't even call or message me. They're on strict blackout, no contact with anyone rules, and it really sucks. I know it's his job and ultimately, he's doing an amazing job and I am so proud of him. But today I'm just feeling really selfish and lonely and I want him home, back safe with me in our quiet little apartment with Dynamight. Hisashi nodded in agreement with him, wrapping an arm around Izuku's shoulders in solidarity and comfort. I know it's strong, kiddo, being in a relationship with a pro. Trust me, both myself and Shota have been in your position, and Bakugo's position, more times than we care to admit. It's the worst feeling ever. I won't lie to you and say it ever gets any easier, it doesn't, but trust me when I say that Bakugo relies on you. He needs you to stay strong and be ready for when he gets home. I don't know what the case is that he's working on right now, but the fact he's already been gone for several days says to me it's kinda a big deal. He'll come home to you eventually, and he'll probably be drained and feeling like absolute SHT. Take these feelings of missing him, these feelings of love, and use them to show him how much you care and how much you love him when he gets back. Trust me, he'll appreciate it. Izuku let the tears fall now, not caring about feeling embarrassed in front of his former teacher. Duh. Thank you Hisashi. It means a lot, hearing it from someone like you. He's never had to be away for this long before, and I think I was taking it for granted, always having him around. I know I need to get used to it. This surely won't be the last time he's called away for an extended PRD of time for a mission. I just wish it didn't have to hurt so much. I know, kiddo. I know, it's a tough job, but someone's gotta do it, Yeah, you're right. I know that. I guess I'm just scared he won't make it home to me or something. Hisashi scoffed, squeezing Izuku's shoulder. It would take something insanely crazy to take that man of yours out of commission. Bakugo is strong and smart. No D-list villains are gonna get one over on him, my little listener." Izuku laughed, grateful for the slice of humor Hizashi had slid in there. DMN straight Zashi. As Kachan would say, he won't let number 2-bit villains get past him. Exactly my point, Izuku. Now come on. Let's get you something to eat and drink so you can at least face this afternoon with that blinding smile, yeah? You can't head back to homeroom looking like someone kicked your puppy. Izuku chuckled again in agreement, standing to go fetch his bag and a bite to eat. Upon opening said bag, he realized he'd left his pre-prepared bento in the fridge. At home. Again. He sighed loudly, shoulders sinking in defeat. Hizashi frowned, standing up to join Izuku when he realized what had happened. "No worries, my dude. Let's head over to Lunch Rush and get something hot and fresh to eat, yeah? Shota and I are never prepared for school days. Lunch Rush is our god and savior." Izuku laughed weakly, throwing his bag back down and accepting Hizashi's suggestion with a nod. Lunch Rush it is. Izuku's afternoon started off a little better than his morning. He had a belly full of ramen, and was feeling a tad more chipper after his chat with Hizashi. He knew he was being slightly overdramatic about Katsuki's absence, but he just couldn't help it. With no definitive end date to the mission, and no communication with his lover, he was missing his boyfriend to the point of agony. He was unaccustomed to dealing with these feelings, having never before experienced a love as strong as he felt for his Kachan. He wondered if Katsuki felt the same way, if he was struggling with the distance and enforced zero contact between them. A selfish part of him hoped that he was agonizing over the wait to come back home. Izuku felt selfish, but at the same time simply could not give a DMN. He wanted his Kachan home. His homeroom class were a lot more settled after lunch than they had been when Izuku first arrived. Apparently, the debate about Mirko and her retirement had reached some sort of conclusion and everyone was friends again. Izuku could not have been more relieved. Class 2B had heroics training that afternoon, so after ensuring everyone was present and correct, Izuku let them grab their hero suitcases and head on out to ground beta. He would be viewing and examining their training alongside All Might and Cementos. It was a simple setup really, a take on capture the flag with half the class being assigned as heroes to rescue the flags, whilst the other half played the villains who had taken said flags. Each team had their set objectives. The heroes had to grab the various flags scattered across the training ground, whilst the other half did everything in their power to stop them. Team members were selected at random by pulling names out of a hat. The game was set, and the pieces were moving. Izuku watched his class from the observation room, frantically taking notes as his students fought for DMNCE over the flags placed around the training arena. His class was good, no one could deny that. But Izuku worried that their confidence would ultimately be their downfall. Riku was fast, able to nip in and grab the flags from his opponent's hands before they had chance to even blink. Emi was cautious and calculating, waiting for the prime opportunity to strike. Aki was a lot more hesitant than her classmates, seemingly waiting to see what happened and how she could then adapt to the situation and take control. Ichiro barreled in seemingly without a care, using his strength and size to charge through the ranks of his classmates. Izuku noted it all down, pen moving across the pages at the speed of light. All Might chuckled to himself, watching his protege with unbridled glee. Please, never change young Midoriya. Keep that flame burning bright. All too soon the exercise was over, worn-out students dragging themselves back to the entrance of ground beta. Izuku always entered this arena with the feeling of his heart being in his throat, remembering back to the time he and Bakugo had fought here. All those years ago. How much THCE then? His class was exhausted, but ultimately thrilled at the outcome. 6 flags had been there for the taking. The heroes had managed to successfully rescue 3, whilst the villains were able to hold onto the other 3. It was ultimately a draw, neither side winning or losing. Izuku couldn't be more proud. Whilst All Might and Cementos started discussing his students' techniques and where they had done well or fallen short, Izuku flipped back through his notebook, trying to find where he had written down detailed analysis of his students. However, as he perused through the pages, he realized something had gone terribly wrong. His pen was running out of ink. His breath hitched in his street as realization dawned. How had he not noticed this at the time of writing? Half of his notes were completely illegible. Nothing more than faint chicken scrawl in faded ink across the paper. Even Izuku struggled to decipher it. These notes were worthless. Izuku refrained from screaming out loud, opting instead to clench his fists in silent anguish. Apparently today could get worse. Izuku was in desperate need of a Kachan cuddle. He needed those big, strong arms to come in and sweep him off his feet. He needed to be squeezed to within an inch of his life, tight muscles and hardened pecs smothering him in love and attention. But Kachan wasn't here. He was far away, fighting villains in a giant city and leaving Izuku to deal with the fallout of everything on his own. Present Mike's earlier pep talk now fell on deaf ears. Izuku was done. He wanted nothing more than to be scooped up into his Kachan's arms, having the air squeezed out of him as they cuddled and kissed in blessed reunion. Izuku needed his Kachan. He needed him home. Izuku felt the tears building up behind his eyes, threatening to fall at any minute and embarrass him in front of his class. He swallowed strong, taking a deep breath to try and compose himself in front of his students. It simply would not do to have an emotional breakdown in front of his class and former senseis. He forced himself to straighten up and address the students. "Oh, okay guys. That was a brilliant show of strength and determination from both sides. I'm really impressed with how you all used your quirks strategically to maximum benefit. You should be proud of yourselves. Well done everyone." His entire class erupted in cheers and shouts of joy, high fives and fist bumps being flung all over the place. Izuku smiled softly along with them, taking this small moment of joy in an absolute shitshow of a day to try and make himself feel even the tiniest bit better. He just wanted to go home. An hour or so later, Izuku found himself pacing around his office, wanting nothing more than to text his Kachan to ask how things were going in Tokyo. But he knew there was no point. Katsuki was under complete blackout rules, no contact with anyone outside of the mission team. Izuku's messages wouldn't even be read, let alone replied to. Katsuki was nothing if not a consummate professional when it came to his hero work. He never let anything, or anyone, come between him and certain victory. Not even his favorite nerd apparently. Izuku wanted to curl up in a ball of misery and cry. He hadn't felt this dejected and so utterly lost since he'd lost One for All. He hated how emotionally dependent he'd become on Katsuki. He was so used to having the blonde around in his life, a constant reaffirming presence in his world, that being without him for a prolonged period of time felt like a dagger straight to the heart. He wanted more than anything to just be able to leap into his arms, smother him with kisses of love and affection. Not having him nearby made his heart hurt so much, he didn't know what to do. In response to his own chaotic brain, Izuku sat down at his desk and forced himself to take out the latest batch of exams from his students. Grading papers for a time would surely distract him from the utter heartache and stupidity of the day he had just endured. Katsuki was exhausted beyond belief. The job in Tokyo had taken a lot longer to finish up than he'd anticipated, and he wanted nothing more than to crawl back home to his favorite green-haired nerd. His entire body ached. He'd been running on adrenaline and fumes for the last 3 days, and he was more than ready to face-plant his pillow. He also really wanted an Izuku cuddle. No one had a grip strength to match that of his nerd, and he wanted to just be squeezed to death by his favorite green bean. Katsuki was homesick. He was Izuku sick, and he was literally counting down the minutes until he was safely back in his own apartment with his own shitty nerd in his arms. The current arrival time on his GPS said 54 minutes, Katsuki would make it 30. Foot flat to the accelerator, Katsuki beelined for home, not caring if he was caught speeding. For the past 10 years or so, he hadn't gone longer than a couple of days without Izuku being physically in his presence. 13 days was far too long a sentence for him. He missed his nerd, damn it. He wanted to grab him, squeeze him tight to show just how much he had missed him, and how badly he wanted to come home. Tokyo could SCK his PP. All he wanted right now was Izuku Midoriya. What made it all worse was the enforced no contact. He'd have given his right ballsack to ring Izuku just to hear his nerd ramble on about nothing in particular. He pushed his card to the absolute limit, figuring he could make up some story about being needed for an urgent mission in Musutafu if the need arose. His hero license had gotten him out of worse scrapes in the past. His GPS dropped from 50 minutes to 33, and Katsuki smirked to himself. If he was able to, He'd get home before Izuku had finished up at school, and he'd be able to surprise the nerd when he got home. He'd lather so much love and attention onto the nerd that Izuku wouldn't be able to walk without limping for at least a week. Katsuki's smirk grew as he drove along, already imagining the many dirty and depraved things he wanted to do to his nerd. Yup. 13 days was definitely too long. Izuku sobbed quietly, head resting on his arms on the desk, unable to hold back the tears any longer. It was gone 7 p.m. Long past the point where both students and teachers had headed home or to the dorms. But Izuku found himself in the end not wanting to go home. He hated coming home to a cold, quiet, and empty apartment. Even Minnie-Mite's presence wasn't enough to spur him into action today. Minnie-Mite had one of those timed automatic feeders that would release his biscuits at set times when both Izuku and Katsuki weren't around. He'd be just fine. Izuku wanted nothing more than to be enveloped in a big Kachan hug, one that would expel all the air from his lungs and leave him feeling breathless. He missed the smell, the sound, the taste of Kachan, and would have given anything in that moment in order to have his most favorite explosive blonde sat there with him. He let his tears fall, uncaring if anyone came into his office. Zuku. Izuku blinked, drawn momentarily from his daydream. Had someone called his name? Zuku? Babe? Are you with me right now? Izuku blinked again, slowly coming back into awareness of his office at UA. Someone was knelt on the floor beside him, holding his hand and rubbing across his knuckles gently, lovingly. Zuku, can you hear me, baby? I'm home. Kachan. His Kachan? Surely not. Kachan? Yeah, baby. Yeah, your Kachan's here. A tight squeeze to his fingers. Izuku blinked, forcing his remaining tears out so that he could see clearly. Kachan. Kachan is home. Yeah, babe. Kachan's home. I'm right here, Zuku. Back where I belong, right next to you. Izuku sniffled, feeling every emotion that had ever existed bubble up inside him. He let out a small whimper before throwing himself into Katsuki's arms. He huffed slightly as he took Izuku's full weight onto himself. It took nanoseconds for him to wrap his own arms around the greenhead, face buried deep into silky soft curls. I'm back, baby. I'm home. Izuku sobbed then, shakes racking his body. Katsuki tightened his grip, nuzzling deeper into his boyfriend's neck. Zuku. I missed you so effin' much. I missed you too, Kachan, so much. I'm so happy you're home. Me too, Zuku, me too. The pair just sat there in silence for a bit, each clinging to the other like their lives depended on it. Katsuki was the first to pull back, hands coming up to cradle Izuku by the jaw. I love you so effin' much, Zuku. He pressed a deep embrace onto the other's lips, Izuku sighing and opening his mouth in acceptance. Their tongues danced together for a time, neither one wanting to break their physical connection. Fingers gripped deep into hair as they moaned against each other, pulling and tugging at each other as their ARLSL grew. Mkaken. Kachan, I need you. What do you need, baby? You. All of you. Take me here. Right here and now. Zuku. You sure? Izuku pulled back for a moment, deep green eyes and pupils blown wide with ARLSL. Take me, Kachan. Please, I need you. Okay, babe. Okay. Kachan's got you. Katsuki laid Izuku down onto the floor, taking care to ensure he wasn't near anything that could hurt him. He knew from experience that Izuku tended to flail a lot when lost in the throes of passion. He started by unbuttoning Izuku's shirt, taking his time as he popped each button free one by one. He sat straddling Izuku, squeezing his thighs together to ensure he could feel every inch of his precious nerd. So appealing, Zuku. So effin' perfect for me. He leant down to nip and suckle at Izuku's exposed street, dragging his tongue across his nipples and leaving the tiniest of bites. Izuku mewled beneath him, back arching up in need. Kachan. I know, baby, I know. Let me have some fun, okay? Katsuki responded, taking one pert NPL into his mouth and sucking. Izuku whined and bucked his hips up, desperate for more contact. His hands flew up to grab Katsuki's hair and waist, fingers tightening in anticipation. Katsuki took his time licking and biting his way down Izuku's torso, determined to leave his mark wherever he could. He'd been concerned when, after arriving home some hours ago, Izuku had not appeared at the door. He'd been able to clean up, DMN the hot water being out, get changed, and even start on dinner, but his nerd didn't come home. Finally his impatience won out, and he jumped in the car to speed over to Ua. He hadn't messaged Izuku, wanting his arrival home to be a surprise, but there was only so long the blonde could wait. Maybe Izuku had fallen asleep at his desk again or something. It was a common enough occurrence. Instead, the sad sight that greeted him as he entered Izuku's office made his heart shatter. Izuku was face down at his desk, shoulders shaking with unfiltered sobs. Katsuki had rushed in to kneel at his side, grabbing his hand and trying to get his attention. It took a while before Izuku realized he was there, and when he'd lifted his face to look at him, Katsuki could see the exhaustion etched across every freckle. Seemed Izuku was having a bad day. Katsuki would make it better. Katsuki pulled himself back up to meet Izuku's lips, hands gripping at his waist. Izuku brought his own arms up to wrap tightly around Katsuki's neck and shoulders, as though he was scared the blonde was going to disappear. Katsuki sat back into a kneeling position, bringing Izuku up with him to straddle his lap. The greenette moved his mouth down to nibble along Katsuki's jawline and neck, eliciting soft moans from his partner. His hands slid up and under Katsuki's shirt, fingernails raking gently down his back. Katsuki bit down into the soft skin of Izuku's collarbone, making the other man groan and causing him to dig his nails in deeper to Katsuki's back. Katsuki wasn't the only one wanting to leave his mark. Deft hands reached down to undo Izuku's belt buckle and fly, fingers reaching in to brush against tightening boxers. Izuku's breath caught in his throat, his hips bucking forward into Katsuki's grasp. NNGH. Ha. Ka. Ka-chan, get in the chair baby. I'm gonna take care of you. Katsuki lifted Izuku to sit back in his office chair, removing his trousers as he did so, spreading the nerd's legs. He knelt down between them, bringing his face into Izuku's crotch to start nibbling and sucking his way across freckled thighs. Izuku moaned, threading his fingers through soft blonde spikes as Katsuki ran his own hands up and down Izuku's legs. He could feel the pressure building. Already 2 weeks of enforced abstinence was making itself known. He knew he wouldn't be able to last long once Katsuki really got going. Katsuki slipped his fingers into the waistline of Izuku's boxers, pulling them down enough to let his pee-pee bounce free. He was done taking his time. He wanted Izuku screaming his name in pleasure as he came. The blonde wasted no time in dragging his hot, wet tongue up the underside of Izuku's. He teased around the tip, feeling Izuku's fingers clench in his hair. Katsuki hummed as he took Izuku further into his mouth, letting soft vibrations pass through to Izuku's core. The greenette moaned out loud, letting his head fall back as he felt himself bliss out. Thank God there was no one else left in the building. They'd probably get arrested for public indecency. Izuku was right in his estimations that he wouldn't last long. Before he knew it, his orgasm was ripping through his body, head thrown back as he let out a long low his thighs tightening around Katsuki as the blonde swallowed everything down. Fu. Fuck. Ka-chan. Kashan, the blonde smirked, tucking Izuku back into place and standing, hands braced on the chair as he leant over to inspect his handiwork. Izuku looked completely blissed out, half-hooded red-rimmed eyes staring back at him. A faint blush covered his cheeks, his freckles small pinpoints of a constellation scattered across his face. He'd never looked more appealing to Katsuki. Katsuki took one of Izuku's hands in his, pulling him to his feet. Come on Zuku. Let's go home yeah? As Katsuki drove them home through the darkened streets, Izuku let his head rest against the window with a small smile. His day had been awful, downright terrible, and he'd finally let himself crack under the pressure. His eyes still stung from his crying session earlier in the evening. But then Katsuki had come swooping in like Izuku's knight in black and orange armor, and in the space of just a few minutes had managed to completely undo all the shittiness that the day had stacked on him. It wasn't even just because of the mind-blowing ORL that had turned Izuku into a useless puddle of green goo. Katsuki was simply everything Izuku ever needed to feel whole. He was his best friend, his lover, his home. No matter what kind of day Izuku had, he knew his Ka-chan would be there at the end of it, and that was all that mattered.